I stood in my childhood bedroom staring at the crisp white navy dress uniform hanging on the door. 4 gold stars gleamed on each shoulder board. My phone buzzed with another text from Dad. "Still time to change into a real wedding dress. Don't embarrass yourself." My hands trembled as I touched the medals on my chest. 20 years of service, countless missions, and he still saw me as his disappointing daughter. Today at my wedding, everything would change. He just didn't know it yet. The morning sunlight filtered through the faded curtains of my childhood bedroom, casting shadows across the uniform that represented everything my father never wanted for me. As I ran my fingers along the pristine fabric, memories flooded back to when this journey began, long before I ever dreamed of wearing stars on my shoulders. Growing up as Frank Miller's daughter meant living in a world built for boys. My father, a construction foreman who spent his days commanding crews of men, came home each evening to a house full of daughters. 3 of us, Amy, Jessica, and me. Chastity, the youngest. You could see the disappointment settle into the lines of his face whenever he looked at us, especially during those moments when other fathers talked about teaching their sons to throw footballs or fix engines. I tried harder than my sisters to bridge that gap. While Amy played with dolls and Jessica practiced piano, I begged Dad to let me hand him tools while he worked on his truck. I joined every sports team our school offered: softball, basketball, track. I pushed myself to be captain of each one, thinking that maybe if I brought home enough trophies, he'd look at me the way he looked at his buddies' sons. "Nice game today, kiddo," he'd say, barely glancing at another first-place medal. "But remember, sports won't matter when you're married. Better to focus on skills that'll help you keep a good home." My report cards were flawless. Straight A's every semester, honor roll, National Honor Society. I'd spread them out on the kitchen table, waiting for him to come home, hoping this time would be different. Smart girls intimidate boys. He'd warned folding the papers without really looking. Don't want to end up alone because you were too focused on being clever. The summer after my 18th birthday changed everything. While my classmates prepared for college orientations and dorm shopping, I made a decision that would shatter the fragile peace in our household. Without telling anyone, I walked into the Navy recruitment office on Main Street and signed my name on the dotted line. For 3 weeks, I kept the secret locked inside, going through the motions of family dinners and helping Mom with laundry, while my future waited in sealed documents hidden beneath my mattress. The weight of that choice pressed against my chest every time Dad talked about Amy's engagement or Jessica's acceptance to the local community college. The truth came out on a humid Thursday evening. Mrs. Patterson from 2 houses down had seen me leaving the recruitment office during my final paperwork appointment. Small towns never could keep secrets, and she wasted no time sharing this particular gossip with her book club, which included my mother's sister. I was setting the table for dinner when Dad burst through the front door, his face the color of overripe tomatoes. Mom followed behind him, wringing her hands, while Amy and Jessica peered around the corner from the living room. "What's this I hear about you joining the military?" His voice shook the pictures on the wall. I straightened my shoulders, meeting his glare. "It's true. I leave for basic training in 2 weeks." The silence that followed felt like the pause before a thunderstorm. Then the explosion came. "Have you lost your mind throwing your life away to play soldier? That's the most selfish, stupid decision you could make." His fist slammed onto the dining table, making the plates jump. "It's my life, Dad, my choice." "Your choice. You're just a girl. The military is no place for you. What about marriage, children? A real future?" "This is my real future." The words hung between us like a challenge. His jaw clenched and unclenched as he processed my defiance. Without another word, he turned and stalked to his bedroom, slamming the door with enough force to rattle the windows. That was the last time he spoke to me for 6 months. The 2 weeks before I left passed in a fog of hostile silence. Dad would leave for work before I woke up and come home after I'd gone to bed. If we accidentally crossed paths, he'd look through me as if I were invisible. Mom tried to play peacemaker, leaving little notes under my door with Bible verses about forgiveness, but she never stood up to him directly. My sisters followed his lead with the cruelty that only siblings can perfect. Amy engaged to her high school sweetheart, and deep in wedding planning made pointed comments about how some people were too selfish to think about family. Jessica, always desperate for Dad's approval, parroted his words about women knowing their place. On my last morning home, I dragged my single duffel bag down the stairs at 4 a.m, planning to catch the early bus to the processing station alone. But when I reached the kitchen, Mom stood there in her threadbare bathrobe, a cup of coffee in her hands and tears in her eyes. "I packed you some sandwiches," she whispered, handing me a brown paper bag. "And there's something else." She pressed an envelope into my palm. Inside were 5 $100 bills and a note in her shaky handwriting, "Make me proud." We stood there in the pre-dawn darkness, two women caught between love and loyalty. She pulled me into a fierce hug, her tears dampening my shoulder. "He's wrong about you," she breathed into my ear. "But he's too stubborn to see it. Show them all what Miller women are made of." The front door clicked shut behind me with a finality that echoed in my bones. As the bus pulled away from everything I'd known, I watched my childhood home shrink in the distance. Through the living room window, I caught a glimpse of a silhouette. Dad standing behind the curtain, watching me leave. He might have been too proud to say goodbye, but he couldn't help watching his youngest daughter disappear into a future he couldn't control. That image burned itself into my memory, a reminder that sometimes love comes wrapped in disappointment and fear. Basic training waited for me with its promises of transformation. I didn't know then that I was embarking on a journey that would take me from that broken foundation to heights no one in my family could imagine. All I knew was that I was finally free to prove what I'd always known deep in my core. I wasn't just Frank Miller's disappointing daughter. I was Chastity Miller, and I was going to show the world what that meant. Boot camp at Naval Station. Great Lakes transformed me in ways I never anticipated. Every morning at 04:30, as I made my rack with military precision and prepared for another day of grueling training, I felt myself becoming someone new. The soft edges of the small-town girl were carved away, replaced by strength I never knew existed. My division commander, Petty Officer Martinez, pushed us beyond our limits daily. While other recruits struggled and complained, I thrived. The physical challenges that broke some people down only made me hunger for more. I finished every run at the front of the pack, completed every evolution with determination that surprised even myself. "Miller, you've got something special," Martinez told me after a particularly brutal combat fitness test. "Keep pushing like this and doors will open for you in this Navy." 8 weeks flew by in a blur of marching classes and weapons training. When graduation day arrived, I scanned the crowd of families, knowing mine wouldn't be there, but hoping anyway. As my division performed our final pass in review, I held my head high, letting pride fill the empty space where family support should have been. My first leave came with 10 days of freedom and a bus ticket home. Part of me wanted to skip Iowa entirely, maybe visit Chicago or see the ocean for the first time. But Mom's letters had been arriving weekly, filled with careful updates about everything except what mattered most. I needed to try one more time to bridge the chasm between Dad and me. The cornfields of home looked exactly the same as I remembered, but I felt like a stranger passing through a previous life. My dress blues hung perfectly pressed in a garment bag, medals aligned precisely on the chest. I'd earned expert marksman badges and been selected for advanced training programs. Maybe seeing his daughter in uniform would finally make Dad understand. Mom nearly dropped her coffee cup when I walked through the front door. She pulled me into an embrace that smelled of vanilla extract and laundry soap, examining every inch of me as if I might have been replaced by someone else. "You look so different," she murmured, touching the sleeve of my uniform. "Stronger. Where is everyone?" Her smile faltered slightly. "Your father's at work. The girls are coming for dinner tonight. He said he wants to have a special welcome home meal." Something in her tone set off warning bells, but I pushed the unease aside. Maybe 6 months of silence had given him time to accept my choice. Maybe we could finally move forward as a family. The afternoon passed quietly as I helped Mom prepare her famous pot roast and apple pie. She asked careful questions about training, marveling at stories of obstacle courses and firefighting drills. We worked side by side in comfortable rhythm until the sound of Dad's truck in the driveway made us both freeze. He walked in without looking at me, hanging his hard hat on the usual hook and washing his hands at the kitchen sink. The familiar routine felt surreal after months of military precision and purpose. "Chase City's home," Mom announced unnecessarily. "I can see that," he replied, finally turning to face me. His eyes swept over my uniform with an expression I couldn't read. "Better change into something appropriate for dinner. We're having company." Before I could respond, car doors slammed outside. Amy entered first her engagement ring, catching the light as she waved dismissively at my uniform. Jessica followed arm in arm with her boyfriend, both of them exchanging meaningful glances. Then came someone unexpected. Tom Garrison walked into my childhood home like he owned it, his freshly divorced status apparently making him the evening's guest of honor. He was 35, worked at the bank, and had a son from his failed marriage. Most importantly, he was exactly the kind of steady, boring man my father considered suitable husband material. "You remember Tom," Dad said, clapping him on the shoulder. "His divorce was finalized last month. Thought it would be nice for you two to catch up." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't a welcome home dinner. This was an ambush. We sat around the dining table in assigned seats that felt like chess positions. Dad placed Tom directly across from me, while my sisters flanked us like guards. Mom served dinner with shaking hands, her eyes apologizing for something she couldn't prevent. "So Chastity." Tom began cutting into his pot roast with self-important precision. "Your dad tells me you've been playing sailor. Must be quite an adventure." "I'm serving my country," I corrected, keeping my voice level. "Just graduated from basic training with honors." He chuckled, the sound grating against my nerves. "Well, sure. Good to get that out of your system while you're young. Frank and I were discussing your future, actually." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "My future?" Dad leaned forward, his expression triumphant. "Tom's looking for someone sensible to help raise his boy, someone who understands responsibility. I told him you'd be finishing up this Navy nonsense soon." The room tilted slightly as rage built in my chest. Around me, my family continued eating as if this were perfectly normal dinner conversation, as if my life were community property to be distributed at their discretion. In fact, Tom continued, apparently oblivious to the danger in my silence. "Frank suggested you could be discharged for family hardship. Taking care of a child would certainly qualify. We could have you back home and settled within a few months." "The military is no place for women anyway," he added with a patronizing smile. "All that aggressive training, living with strange men. It's not natural. You need a stable home, a family to care for." Something inside me snapped with an almost audible crack. I stood slowly placing my napkin beside my plate with deliberate calm. "Let me make something very clear." I began my voice carrying the authority I'd learned from drill instructors. "I am not coming home. I am not marrying you or anyone else my father picks out like livestock at auction. I am not abandoning my career to play stepmother to your child. And I am certainly not going to sit here and listen to you disrespect my service and my choices." Tom's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Dad's face darkened to purple. "Sit down," he ordered. "You're being dramatic and ungrateful." Ungrateful. The word tasted bitter. For what? For a father who schemes behind my back, for a family that treats me like property to be traded, for this pathetic attempt to control my life. "You selfish little girl," Dad exploded, slamming his palm on the table. "Do you know how hard I worked to arrange this? Tom's a good man with a steady job. He's willing to take on damaged goods, and you're throwing it in his face." Damaged goods. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Mom gasped softly. Even my sisters looked uncomfortable. "I'm done here." I turned toward the door, my military bearing the only thing keeping me upright. "You walk out that door, you're not welcome back," Dad shouted. You're choosing strangers over family." I paused at the threshold, looking back at the scene. Tom still sat, frozen gravy congealing on his plate. My sisters studied their hands. Dad stood rigid with fury. And Mom was crying silently into her napkin. "I'm choosing myself," I said quietly. "For the first time in my life, I'm choosing myself." The cool evening air hit my face as I stepped outside, carrying the scent of approaching rain. My rental car waited in the driveway like an escape pod. As I threw my bag into the back seat, footsteps hurried behind me. Mom caught my arm just as I reached for the door handle. In her trembling hands was another envelope thicker than the first. "I've been saving," she whispered urgently, glancing back at the house. "Tips from alterations, spare change, birthday money. It's not much, but—" "Mom, I can't take your money." "Yes, you can. You will." Fierce determination blazed through her tears. "I was young once. I had dreams too. But I let fear and this town and your father convince me to give them up. Don't make my mistakes, baby girl. Fly high enough for both of us." She pressed the envelope into my hands along with something else. A small photo of herself at 18 standing beside a Greyhound bus with a suitcase and eyes full of possibility. "That was the day I was supposed to leave for nursing school in Chicago," she explained. "The day I met your father instead and stayed. Keep it as a reminder. When things get hard, when you want to quit, remember what happens when you let other people choose your life for you." We held each other in the gathering darkness, 2 generations of dreams deferred and demanded. When she finally pulled away, steel glinted in her eyes. "Make me proud," she repeated. "Show them all what we could have been." I drove away from that house for the second time, but this departure felt different. This wasn't escape. This was declaration. In my rearview mirror, I caught sight of Mom standing in the driveway, one hand raised in farewell or blessing. The headlights cut through Iowa darkness as I headed back to base, back to a future I was building with my own hands. Tom Garrison and his convenient proposals could rot. My father and his 19th century expectations could sulk. I had a destiny to claim, and no ambush dinner was going to stop me from seizing it. The years following that disastrous dinner became my crucible. Each deployment, each training evolution, each fitness test was another step away from the life my father had planned for me. I threw myself into military service with the dedication of someone who had everything to prove and nothing left to lose. Advanced training schools opened doors I hadn't known existed. Intelligence-gathering combat tactics, specialized warfare programs. My instructors recognized something hungry in me, a drive that went beyond simple career ambition. When the opportunity arose to try out for one of the military's most elite programs, I didn't hesitate. "You understand what you're signing up for?" Master Chief Reynolds asked during my initial interview. "The Naval Special Warfare Assessment is designed to break people, strong people. We've never had a woman complete the program." "Then I'll be the first Master Chief." He studied me with eyes that had seen too many hopeful candidates wash out. "The men won't want you there. The instructors will be harder on you. The standards won't bend, not 1 inch." "I'm not asking them to Master Chief." A ghost of a smile crossed his weathered face. "Report to Coronado Monday morning, 0500. Bring your war face Miller. You're going to need it." The Naval Amphibious Base Coronado looked deceptively peaceful in the pre-dawn darkness. Palm trees swayed in the ocean breeze. Waves lapped gently at the shore. It could have been a vacation paradise except for the line of anxious candidates standing at attention on the beach, about to enter a world of carefully orchestrated suffering. 143 men and me. The whispers started immediately. Glances ranging from curious to hostile followed my every move. During the initial physical screening test, bets were already being placed on how long I'd last. "Give it a week," I heard one candidate mutter. "First time she breaks a nail, she's gone." 3 days, another countered. "Soon as Hell Week starts, she'll ring that bell so fast it'll spin." The instructors made their position clear from moment one. If the other candidates viewed me as an unwelcome anomaly, the instructor cadre saw me as a personal insult to their brotherhood. Well, well, well. Instructor Petty Officer Jacobson circled me like a shark. Looks like someone's lost. The yoga class is at the gym, sweetheart. This is where warriors train. Petty Officer, this candidate is exactly where she's supposed to be. Petty Officer. I barked the response, eyes fixed straight ahead. We'll see about that. What followed was 6 months of the most grueling training the human body and mind could endure. Every evolution pushed past the boundaries of what seemed possible. 4-mile timed runs in boots and pants, 2-mile ocean swims in frigid water, obstacle courses that left your hands bloody and lungs burning, log PT with telephone poles that felt heavier with each repetition. The instructors kept their promise to make it harder for me. While others did 100 push-ups, I did 150. When the men carried boats on their heads for an hour, I carried mine for 90 minutes. Every mistake I made was magnified, every success minimized. Miller. Your boat crew just failed their time hack because of you, Jacobson screamed during a beach run. Drop and push out flutter kicks until I get tired. I kicked until my abdominal muscles seized and vision blurred. When he finally let me recover, my boat crew glared with undisguised hatred. I was making their lives harder, simply by existing in their space. Hell Week arrived with its promise of maximum pain. 5.5 days of constant physical evolution, with 4 total hours of sleep. Bodies broke down, minds shattered. The bell rang constantly as candidates surrendered to the sweet relief of quitting. By day 3, our class had shrunk by more than half. Hypothermia was a constant companion as we spent hours in the cold Pacific, linking arms and singing to keep spirits up while instructors sprayed us with hoses. My body had stopped feeling like my own, operating on pure will while my mind retreated to a small, protected space. Still hanging in there, princess? Jacobson appeared during a brief rest period, his voice almost conversational. You know no one would blame you for quitting. You've proved your point. First woman to make it this far. That's something to be proud of. Through cracked lips and chattering teeth, I managed a response. Petty Officer, this candidate will leave on a stretcher or with a trident, Petty Officer. We'll see, Miller, we'll see. The surf torture continued. Endless sprints up sand berms, boat races that left legs cramping and shoulders screaming, log PT until people vomited from exhaustion. Through it all, something strange began happening with my boat crew. Miller takes stern position, Rodriguez ordered during a particularly brutal boat carry. The stern was the hardest position, bearing the most weight. I've got it, I tried to protest. That wasn't a request, move. They'd started protecting me in small ways, not out of pity, but from growing respect. When I stumbled during a run, hands steadied me. When my small frame struggled with the boat's weight, they shifted subtly to compensate. We were becoming a team forged in shared misery. The final night of Hell Week brought the ultimate test. Steel piers loomed in the darkness as we prepared for hours of physical training in the freezing water. This was where most people broke, where the siren song of the bell became irresistible. Last chance, Miller, Jacobson said quietly as we lined up. Ring the bell, get warm clothes, hot coffee, a plane ticket home. No shame in admitting you're not built for this. I locked eyes with him, seeing past the instructor persona to the man underneath. He was offering me an honorable exit, perhaps even hoping I'd take it to preserve some status quo. Instead, I took my place in line with my crew. Hoo-yah, Petty Officer. The water was liquid ice. Within minutes, uncontrollable shivering set in. We locked arms, sharing what little body heat remained. Someone started singing, voice cracking but determined. Others joined in creating a ragged chorus against the cold. Hours passed in a hypothermic haze. Instructors pulled people out when they stopped responding to commands. Medical staff hovered nearby, checking for danger signs. The class shrunk further as bells rang in the darkness. When dawn finally broke over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, 28 of us remained. barely conscious, more dead than alive, but still standing. "Hell Week secure," the Master Chief's voice boomed across the beach. We collapsed where we stood, bodies finally given permission to surrender. Medical teams swarmed, wrapping us in blankets and checking vital signs. Through the exhaustion, one thought blazed bright. I had survived what was designed to break me. The remaining months of training blurred together. Diving, qualification land, warfare, weapons, and tactics. My body adapted, growing stronger and more capable. The men who'd wanted me gone became brothers who trusted me with their lives. When graduation day arrived, our class had winnowed down to 15. Standing on that same beach where it all began, dress whites pristine in the California sun, I received my trident pin. The weight of that small piece of metal represented everything, every brutal evolution, every moment of doubt conquered, every barrier shattered. Petty Officer Miller. Admiral Morrison addressed me after the ceremony. "You've made history today. How does it feel?" "Like the beginning, sir, not the end." He smiled knowingly. "Spoken like a true operator. Your orders are waiting. Report to SEAL Team 3 Monday morning. They're expecting great things from you." That evening alone in my barracks room, I finally allowed myself to call home. The phone rang 4 times before Mom answered, her voice carefully neutral. "Hi, Mom, I have news." "Oh, sweetheart, tell me everything." I described the ceremony, the pin, what it all meant. She cried openly, pride overflowing through the phone line. In the background, I heard Dad's voice asking who was calling. "It's Chastity," she told him. "She graduated from her special program. She's officially a Navy SEAL." Silence. Then his voice dismissive and cold. "So she can swim? Big deal." The line went dead with a click. He'd hung up on me, reducing 6 months of hell to a dismissive sentence. I stared at the phone, waiting for the hurt to hit. Instead, I felt only resolve crystallizing into something harder than diamonds. If my father couldn't see what I'd become, that was his loss. I had a team now, brothers, who'd bled beside me. I had a purpose that went beyond seeking anyone's approval. Setting the phone aside, I polished my new trident until it gleamed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove myself. The girl who'd left Iowa in disgrace had died somewhere in the surf of Hell Week. In her place stood Petty Officer Chastity Miller, Navy SEAL, and I was just getting started. The transport helicopter descended through clouds of dust and chaos into Forward Operating Base Chapman. My first deployment as a Navy SEAL was about to begin, and the war-torn landscape of Afghanistan stretched endlessly below. Mountains that had swallowed empires whole waited with their ancient indifference to our presence. 30 seconds, the crew chief shouted over the rotor noise. I checked my gear one final time, rifle secure plates fitted correctly in my carrier. Around me, my team prepared with practiced efficiency. They'd stopped seeing me as the female SEAL months ago. Now I was simply Miller, their point person trusted with walking first into the unknown. Chief Petty Officer Walsh, our team leader, caught my eye. "You good?" "Always, Chief." The bird touched down in a storm of dust, and we moved out weapons at the ready. FOB Chapman was a maze of concrete barriers, guard towers, and tactical operations centers. The smell hit immediately diesel fuel burn pits and that particular mixture of dust and sweat that defined deployment life. Our mission set was direct action raids against high-value targets. Night after night, we launched into darkness, hunting those who would harm innocents. The intelligence briefings painted clear pictures: bomb makers, facilitators, commanders who sent children to die with explosives strapped to their chests. 3 months in, everything changed. "We have 12 aid workers taken hostage," Commander Bryant announced during a midnight briefing. "International medical team grabbed from their convoy yesterday. Intel suggests they're being held here." He pointed to a compound nestled in a valley 20 miles north. The satellite imagery showed a fortress of mud walls and defensive positions. Getting in would be hard. Getting out with 12 civilians would be harder. "Miller, you're on point," Walsh decided. Rodriguez, you've got rear security with the new guy. We go in quiet violence of action only when necessary. Those aid workers come home. We inserted by helicopter 3 miles from target, moving through terrain that seemed designed to break ankles and destroy noise discipline. Every shadow could hide a sentry. Every rock formation might conceal an ambush. As we approached the compound, hand signals replaced words. Through my night vision, I spotted 2 guards on the wall, lazy and unaware. The suppressed shots dropped them simultaneously, bodies crumpling soundlessly. We flowed over the wall like deadly water, each operator moving to assigned positions. The compound erupted into controlled chaos as we breached multiple buildings simultaneously. Muffled shouts and suppressed gunfire created a deadly symphony. "Jackpot," Rodriguez whispered through comms. 12 packages alive but rough shape. The aid workers huddled in a basement room, chains binding them to the walls. Men and women from 6 different countries united in their mission to help and their current terror. We cut them free medical assessment beginning immediately. "Can you walk?" I asked a young doctor whose eyes held the hollow look of prolonged fear. I think so. Are you really American military?" "We're your ride home, ma'am. Stay close to exactly what we say." The exfiltration turned complicated when enemy reinforcements arrived earlier than expected. The compound became a shooting gallery as we formed a protective cordon around the civilians, moving them toward the landing zone under heavy fire. "Miller, we've got a problem." Walsh pointed to a technical vehicle racing toward our position, heavy machine gun already chattering. Without thinking, I sprinted toward better cover, drawing fire away from the civilians. The vehicle tracked me, bullets chewing apart the wall inches from my head. In the chaos, I spotted a rocket launcher dropped by a dead enemy fighter. Time slowed as training took over. Shoulder the weapon. Acquire the target. Steady breathing despite the incoming fire. The rocket's backblast scorched the air as it flew true, turning the technical into a fireball that lit up the valley. Move, move, move. We reached the landing zone as our helicopters arrived, door gunners laying down suppressive fire. Loading 12 civilians while maintaining security tested every skill we'd developed. The doctor I'd spoken to grabbed my hand as she boarded. "Thank you," she shouted over the rotor noise. "We thought we were going to die." "Not on our watch, ma'am." The after-action review revealed the operation's full scope. Those weren't just random aid workers. They included specialists who'd been establishing vaccination programs in remote villages, potentially saving thousands of children from preventable diseases. Their kidnapping was meant to cripple medical efforts across the entire region. "Outstanding work," Commander Bryant concluded. "You've returned 12 angels of mercy to their missions. Well done." But the deployment's defining moment came 2 weeks later. We were returning from a routine patrol when the ambush hit. IEDs detonated along our convoy route, followed immediately by coordinated small arms fire from elevated positions. Classic complex attack designed for maximum casualties. The lead vehicle took the worst of it, flipping completely over. Through the smoke and chaos, I saw movement. Lieutenant Morrison, our attached intelligence officer, crawled from the wreckage, clearly injured and exposed to enemy fire. Without hesitation, I broke cover, sprinting across open ground as bullets snapped past. Morrison was trying to drag himself to safety, leaving a blood trail in the dirt. I reached him just as an RPG exploded where he'd been seconds before. "I've got you, sir!" Adrenaline gave me strength to throw him over my shoulders, carrying him fireman style back to cover, while our team laid down suppressive fire. Only after reaching safety did I realize who I'd saved. Lieutenant James Morrison, son of Admiral Morrison, who'd pinned on my trident. The same Admiral who now commanded Naval Special Warfare Group 1. "Corpsman up!" I shouted, keeping pressure on his wounds until medical arrived. "You're going to be fine, sir. Stay with me." He survived. More than survived, he recovered fully and returned to duty. The incident report crossed his father's desk, leading to a conversation that would alter my career trajectory. "Petty Officer Miller." Admiral Morrison's voice came through the satellite phone. "My son owes you his life." "Just doing my job, Admiral." No, you went above and beyond. I've been watching your career since graduation. You consistently exceed every standard take on the hardest missions and bring everyone home. It's time we discussed your future. What followed were rapid promotions based on merit and combat performance, from E5 to E6 to Chief Petty Officer in record time. Each advancement came with harder missions, more responsibility, greater trust from command. Syria brought new challenges: urban warfare against an enemy that hid among civilians. Lebanon revealed networks we dismantled with surgical precision. Somalia tested our ability to operate in failed states. Through it all, my reputation grew. You know what they're calling you? Rodriguez mentioned after a particularly successful operation: the ghost. Enemy fighters think you're not real, just a story to scare them. The medals accumulated quietly. Actions in combat that saved lives, prevented disasters, protected the innocent. A silver star here, a bronze star with V device there. The Navy Cross came after an operation so classified, the citation simply read, "For extraordinary heroism in action against enemy forces." Each ribbon on my chest represented moments when everything hung in the balance. Split-second decisions that meant life or death for teammates, civilians, or myself. They were reminders of those who didn't come home, whose sacrifice made our successes possible. 5 years, 67 combat operations, hundreds of lives saved. From the scared girl who'd joined the Navy to escape a small town I'd transformed into something my father could never have imagined: a warrior, a leader, a legend in the special operations community. As I packed my gear for rotation home, Walsh found me in the team room. "You know Morrison's been fast-tracking you for something big, right?" he said. "Word is they're looking at you for commissioned officer programs, maybe even command track." "I'm enlisted chief. This is where I belong." He smiled knowingly. "Maybe, but wars have a way of revealing who should lead. And Miller, you're a born leader. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The transport home gave me time to reflect. In my pocket was a letter from Mom, one of dozens she'd sent to various forward bases. This one was different. Between updates about garden vegetables and church gossip, she'd written a single line that stopped my heart. "Your father keeps a box of newspaper clippings about you hidden in the garage. He thinks I don't know." I read it again, trying to decipher the meaning. The man who'd dismissed my accomplishments, who'd tried to force me into a life I didn't want, was secretly collecting articles about my service. It didn't compute with the Frank Miller I knew. But that was a puzzle for another day. For now, I was Petty Officer First Class Miller, proven in combat, trusted by the best operators in the world. The girl who'd been called damaged goods had become someone extraordinary. And my story was far from over. The military hospital at Balboa smelled like all medical facilities, disinfectant, fighting a losing battle against the underlying scent of human suffering. I'd avoided doctors as much as possible throughout my career, but the shrapnel in my shoulder from our last operation in Syria had finally won the argument. "You should have come in weeks ago," the Navy corpsman scolded while preparing me for minor surgery. "SEALs think you're invincible, but infection doesn't care about your trident." I endured the lecture with practiced patience, already calculating how quickly I could return to full duty. The waiting room was filled with wounded warriors in various stages of recovery, some missing limbs, others bearing scars both visible and hidden. We all shared the same restless energy of operators pulled from the field. Petty Officer Miller. A doctor appeared, but not the Navy surgeon I expected. This man wore civilian clothes under his white coat with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I'm Dr. Ryan Hayes. I'll be consulting on your procedure." Consulting, I thought this was routine fragment removal. He smiled, reviewing my chart. "The placement is near some nerve clusters we need to be careful about. I specialize in combat trauma surgery. Spent the last 3 years working with children in conflict zones, so I've seen my share of shrapnel wounds." Something in his manner put me at ease. Unlike many civilians who treated military members with either excessive reverence or subtle disdain, he simply saw me as a patient who needed help. The surgery went smoothly, and I woke to find him checking my dressings with meticulous care. "Lucky," he murmured. "Another centimeter and you might have lost mobility in that arm. When did this happen?" 6 weeks ago, maybe 7. His eyebrows rose. "You've been operational with metal in your shoulder for 7 weeks. There was work to finish." Instead of launching into another lecture, he simply nodded. "I understand. My last posting was in Aleppo. Sometimes the mission has to come first." He paused. "Though I bet your team would prefer their point person at full capability." He had me there. We talked during my recovery conversations that started with medical updates but wandered into unexpected territory. Ryan had graduated from Harvard Medical School but chose trauma surgery in war zones over lucrative private practice. He spoke Arabic French and was learning Pashto from the Afghan interpreters at the hospital. "Why children?" I asked during one visit. "Why specialize in pediatric trauma?" His face grew thoughtful. "Adults choose their wars even if the choices are limited. Children don't. They're just caught in the crossfire. Someone has to be there specifically for them." Over the following weeks, as I progressed through physical therapy, our professional relationship evolved into something else. He'd appear during lunch breaks sharing stories from his work, while I carefully revealed bits of my own experiences. He never pressed for classified details, understanding operational security better than most civilians. Dinner. He asked one day after clearing me for light duty. "I know a place that serves food that actually tastes like food, unlike hospital cafeterias. Is that medically recommended, Dr. Hayes?" "Call me Ryan, and yes, I'm prescribing a minimum of 1 actual meal in pleasant company. Doctor's orders." The restaurant overlooked San Diego Bay, casual enough that I didn't feel out of place in civilian clothes that still felt foreign after years in uniform. We talked for hours about everything except war. Books, music, terrible movies we loved anyway. He had a dry sense of humor that caught me off guard, making me laugh in ways I'd forgotten were possible. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said over dessert. "What made you join the Navy?" It was a question I'd answered 100 times with practiced responses, but something in his genuine interest made me tell the truth, the whole story. My father, the expectations, the escape that became a calling. He listened without interrupting, without the platitudes most people offered. When I finished, he simply said, "That took incredible courage. Most people never break free from family expectations." "What about you? Your family must be proud. Harvard doctor saving lives." A shadow crossed his face. "My father is Senator William Hayes. You might have heard of him." I had. Everyone in the military knew Senator Hayes, chairman of the Armed Services Committee and one of the most powerful voices on defense policy. Suddenly, certain pieces clicked into place. "That's why you understand operational security," I realized. "You grew up around it. Surrounded by it. Dad's a good man, believes in service above self. But growing up as the senator's son came with its own expectations. He wanted me to follow his path. Law school politics continue the family legacy. When I chose medicine instead and trauma surgery in war zones rather than safe practices stateside," he shrugged. "Let's just say I understand complicated father relationships." We continued seeing each other whenever our schedules allowed. Ryan worked impossible hours at the hospital while I returned to training with my team, but we carved out moments. Coffee at sunrise before he started rounds, late-night phone calls when I couldn't sleep, walks along the beach where conversation flowed as naturally as breathing. "I don't date military," I warned him early on. "Too complicated, too many variables." "I don't date patients," he countered. "Ethical violations and all that. Good thing you're cleared from my care." 3 months in, I met him at the hospital to find him surrounded by children. Not American kids, but refugees from various conflicts brought in through a special program for medical treatment. He moved between them like a conductor orchestrating healing switching languages, making them laugh despite their pain. A little girl missing her left leg grabbed his coat. She whispered something in Arabic that made him kneel beside her bed, listening intently to what seemed like a very important story about a stuffed rabbit. The gentleness in his hands as he examined her surgical site, the way he made her giggle while checking painful areas revealed more about his character than any conversation could. "She wants to know if you're a soldier," he translated when I approached. "She says you stand like the soldiers who saved her family." I knelt beside him, meeting the child's enormous brown eyes. In Arabic, I told her yes, I was a soldier, and that she was very brave. Her smile could have powered the entire hospital. "You speak Arabic." Ryan looked impressed. "You continue to surprise me." "Likewise, doctor, likewise." The relationship deepened without either of us making conscious decisions about it. He never asked me to be less than what I was, never suggested I find safer work or take easier assignments. When I deployed for training exercises, he sent care packages filled with books and good coffee. When he pulled 30-hour shifts during mass casualty events, I made sure food appeared at his apartment. 6 months after that first surgery, everything changed during what should have been a routine dinner. "My father wants to meet you," Ryan announced over pasta. I nearly choked on my wine. "The senator knows about me." He started asking questions when I mentioned I was seeing someone. Dad's former Navy, himself, intelligence community. He has ways of finding things out. Ryan looked apologetic. He may have done a background check. A background check. On me. The implications were staggering. What would a Senate background check reveal about a Navy SEAL with a classified service record? "He called me yesterday," Ryan continued. "Said, and I quote, 'Why didn't you tell me you were dating a decorated Navy SEAL?' He sounded impressed, which, knowing my father, is like anyone else doing cartwheels. 2 weeks later, I found myself at the Hayes family estate in Georgetown, wearing civilian clothes that felt like costume armor. Senator William Hayes stood 6'4" with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. This was a man who'd served as a naval intelligence officer during the Cold War before entering politics. Petty Officer Miller, he greeted me formally, then surprised me by adding, or should I say, the ghost of Kandahar. My blood chilled. That operational nickname was classified beyond classified. "Sir," he smiled slightly. "Relax, Petty Officer. Your secrets are safe. But when my son starts dating someone, I do my due diligence. What I found," he shook his head. "Extraordinary is an understatement. Please join me in the study." The study walls were covered with naval memorabilia and photos from his service days. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed me one without asking if I drank. 67 confirmed operations. He began without preamble. Navy Cross Silver Star, 3 Bronze Stars, youngest woman ever to earn a trident, first female SEAL to see combat. "Do you know what struck me most in your record?" "No, sir." The gaps, the redacted sections, the operations so black they don't officially exist. My clearance is fairly comprehensive, Petty Officer. When even I can't access details, it tells me you've been at the tip of the spear in ways this country will never fully acknowledge. We sat in silence for a moment before he continued. "Ryan doesn't know the specifics, nor should he. But I want you to know something. My son has chosen to heal in places where others wage war. He's seen humanity at its worst and still believes in making it better. I've watched him date people who couldn't understand that calling. You're different. Sir, you understand service, sacrifice, the weight of secrets that can't be shared. You won't ask him to be less than he is, and God knows he won't ask that of you." He raised his glass. "To complicated callings and the people who understand them." We drank and something passed between us. Not quite approval, but recognition. One warrior acknowledging another across generations and different battlefields. Later, as Ryan drove me back to base, he glanced over. "That went better than expected. He usually terrifies the people I date. He's protective of you. He's protective of the country, but yes, also of me." Ryan reached over to squeeze my hand. He sees what I see in you, someone extraordinary trying to pretend she's ordinary. I'm not extraordinary. I just do my job. He laughed, the sound warm in the darkness. Right. That's why my father, who's met presidents and kings, just spent 2 hours asking your opinion on asymmetric warfare tactics. That night, lying in my barracks room, I stared at the ceiling, processing what had happened. I'd found someone who saw me clearly and wasn't intimidated, who understood that service came in many forms, whose own calling matched mine in intensity, if not execution. Ryan never tried to tame me or civilize me or make me smaller. He simply existed in my life like a fixed point of light, constant and warm, and there whenever I needed reminding that the world held more than violence and duty. I love you. I told him 3 weeks later, the words surprising us both as we watched sunset from Coronado Beach. I didn't plan to, but I do. He pulled me close, salt air and surgical soap mingling in a scent I'd forever associate with safety. I love you too, Chastity. Have for months. Just wondered when you'd let yourself admit it. Love in wartime was dangerous. Love as a special operator was nearly impossible. But somehow we'd found something worth the risk, something that made the fights worthwhile and the homecoming sweeter. For the first time since leaving Iowa, I had someone who knew me completely and chose to stay anyway. The damaged goods had found another soul with beautiful scars, and together we were building something neither of us had dared hope for. The beach at Naval Base Coronado held 1,000 memories. This was where I'd nearly died during Hell Week, where I'd earned my trident, where I'd learned to call the ocean home. Now as sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and rose, it was about to hold one more. Ryan had been unusually nervous all week, fumbling with his coffee cup and checking his phone constantly. After 2 years together, I could read his moods like operational briefings. Something was definitely up. "Walk with me," he asked that evening, appearing at the team compound, still in his surgical scrubs. "Everything okay?" "Just walk with me." We strolled along the waterline waves, lapping at our feet. The beach was mostly empty, just a few runners and the ever-present security patrols. Ryan kept touching his pocket, a tell I'd noticed during our first months together. "Chastity," he began, then stopped. Started again. "I've practiced this 100 times. "Practiced what?" He turned to face me, fully backlit by the dying sun. "You know my work means everything to me. Those kids, the surgeries, the chance to heal what war breaks. For the longest time, I thought that was enough, that the work itself would fill all the spaces in my life." My heart began racing, recognizing the moment before he said the words. "Then I met you," he continued, voice steadier now, "and I realized I'd been living half a life. You understand duty in ways most people can't fathom. You've never asked me to choose between my calling and loving you because you know they're not in competition. They're both part of who I am." He dropped to one knee right there in the sand, pulling out a small box. Inside, a simple band with a single stone, elegant and practical. Nothing that would catch on gear or gloves. "Chastity Miller, warrior and woman keeper of my heart and guardian of more secrets than I'll ever know. Will you marry me?" The word yes came out as something between a laugh and a sob. My hands shook as he slipped the ring on, fitting perfectly like he'd known it would. We kissed as waves crashed around us, salt spray mixing with tears I hadn't realized were falling. "I want to do this right," I said against his lips. "White dress, military ceremony, the whole thing. My family—" "We'll invite them all," he assured me. "My father's already making lists, warning he might try to turn it into a state dinner." That night, I called home with news I'd never thought I'd share. Mom answered on the second ring, her voice bright with curiosity about my unusual evening call. "Mom, I'm engaged." The shriek of joy probably woke half of Iowa. Through happy tears, she peppered me with questions about Ryan, the proposal, wedding plans. In the background, I heard Dad's grumbling voice asking about the commotion. "Frank, come here," Mom called. "Chastity's getting married." "Finally doing something sensible," came his distant reply. But he took the phone, his voice gruff as always. "Who's the boy?" He's a doctor dad, trauma surgeon, saves children in war zones. Military. Civilian, but he works with military hospitals. Silence stretched between us before he spoke again. You wearing a dress to this wedding? Actually, I'll be in my dress whites, military ceremony. Of course you are, he sighed. Still playing soldier instead of being a proper bride. The words stung less than they once would have. It's who I am, Dad. Well, we'll be there. Your mother would skin me alive if we missed it. But Chastity consider wearing something appropriate, for once. After we hung up, I sat staring at my phone. 2 years of limited contact birthday cards and Christmas calls, but nothing had really changed. I was still the daughter who disappointed him by choosing my own path. Mom called back an hour later, whispering like a conspirator. Don't mind him, sweetheart. I'm so happy for you and Chastity. There's something you should know. What is it? I was cleaning the garage last month. Found a box hidden behind his tool bench. It's full of newspaper clippings about you. Every article that mentioned your service. He even has printouts from military blogs that talked about the first female SEAL graduating. He thinks I don't know. My throat tightened. Why would he keep those if he's so disappointed? Oh, honey. Mom's voice was sad and knowing. Your father's a complicated man. Pride and stubbornness all tangled up with love he doesn't know how to show. Give him time. Wedding planning consumed the next months between deployments and Ryan's surgical schedule. True to his word, Senator Hayes threw himself into arrangements with military precision. What started as a simple ceremony grew into something larger, a merger of 2 worlds. I've invited a few colleagues, the senator mentioned casually over dinner. Hope you don't mind. Define few, Ryan said suspiciously. The Secretary of Defense wants to attend. Several members of the Armed Services Committee. Oh, and Admiral Morrison called personally to request an invitation. I nearly dropped my fork. The Admiral's coming. My dear, Senator Hayes smiled. When the youngest female flag officer in Navy history gets married, people notice, even if that promotion hasn't been announced yet. What promotion? Ryan and I asked simultaneously. The senator's smile widened. Oops, forget I said anything. Classification and all that. Later, Ryan found me on his apartment balcony staring at the stars. You okay? Flag officer, he said, flag officer. The words felt foreign. That's admiral rank. That's impossible. Is it? He settled beside me, pulling me close. You've been doing the impossible since you were 18. My phone rang, interrupting the moment. Admiral Morrison's name appeared on the screen. Petty Officer Miller, I answered formally. Chief Miller, he corrected. Or should I say Chief Miller for about another week. Can you come to my office tomorrow? Bring your dress whites. All of them. All of them, sir. Every set you own. Oh, and Chastity. Congratulations on your engagement. Ryan's a lucky man. The next morning, I reported to Naval Special Warfare Command with a garment bag, thoroughly confused. Admiral Morrison's aide ushered me into a conference room where several high-ranking officers waited. Chief Miller Morrison began formally. Sit. We need to discuss your future. What followed was surreal. My service record laid out in detail. Operations I'd thought were buried in classification. The lives saved, the missions completed, the barriers broken. You've been operating at a level far above your current rank for years, Admiral Thompson from Personnel Command stated. Circumstances prevented proper recognition. Those circumstances have been resolved. Resolved, sir. Morrison's jaw tightened. Captain Richards, who consistently blocked your promotions, is no longer in a position to influence personnel decisions. An investigation revealed a pattern of discrimination. Your case was the most egregious. They laid out the plan, accelerated promotion to address past oversights, a ceremony 3 days hence, and then, following your promotion to Chief Petty Officer, you'll be commissioned as a warrant officer, Thompson continued. From there, limited duty officer, and then, he paused. The Secretary of the Navy has approved a direct commission to O5 Commander based on your exceptional service record. The room spun slightly. Commander, sir, that's overdue by approximately 3 years, according to our review. Morrison's smile was sharp. But there's more. Given your operational experience and leadership record, you're being considered for flag rank within the year. The Navy needs officers like you in positions where you can effect real change. I left that meeting in a day's dress, whites altered to reflect ranks I'd never dreamed of wearing. 3 days later, in a small ceremony, I put on Chief's anchors. A week after that, officer's bars. By the time wedding invitations went out, I was Lieutenant Commander Miller on track for a star. Does this change things? I asked Ryan that night. The rank, the responsibilities. Only if you let it, he said simply. You're still the same person who saved those aid workers who carried Morrison's son to safety, who fought for everything she has. The rank just makes it official. 3 weeks before the wedding, a package arrived at my quarters. No return address, but the handwriting was Mom's. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was Dad's Navy service pin from Vietnam, the one he'd worn exactly once before being medically discharged. A note in his blocky handwriting read, "Wear this at your wedding. Maybe one of us should get to finish what we started. Dad." I held the pin, this small piece of metal that represented so much. His service cut short, his dreams deferred, his inability to accept that his daughter had achieved what he couldn't. "I'll wear it," I whispered to the empty room, "but I won't hide who I am, not anymore." The wedding drew closer guest lists growing as word spread through the special operations community. SEALs from multiple teams requested leave to attend, Marines I'd worked with in Syria, Army Special Forces who'd shared forward bases. What had started as a simple ceremony was becoming something else entirely. "Your brothers want to honor you," Walsh explained when I questioned the growing military presence. "You don't get to be humble about this one, Miller. Let them show up for you." Even my sisters called voices tentative but warm. Amy asked about bridesmaid dresses before remembering I wouldn't have traditional attendance. Jessica wanted to know about the reception venue. They were trying in their way to bridge the years of distance. "Dad's being weird about the whole thing," Amy confided. "Keeps muttering about proper weddings and military nonsense. But Mom caught him looking at dress uniform regulations online. I think he's trying to understand." The night before the wedding, I stood in my quarters surrounded by uniforms representing 20 years of service. Tomorrow I'd wear the newest ones bearing rank that still felt surreal. Ryan was with his groomsmen maintaining tradition about not seeing the bride. A knock interrupted my preparations. I opened the door to find Master Chief Reynolds, my first instructor from Bud S, holding a garment bag. "Heard you needed something blue," he said gruffly. "The teams put this together." Inside was a trident, not the standard gold, but crafted in deep blue sapphire. A note read, "For our sister who showed us all what courage looks like. Wear this tomorrow and remember you're never alone. Your brothers." I sat on my bunk, overwhelmed by the gesture. Tomorrow I'd walk down an aisle in uniform, disappointing my father's vision of a proper wedding. But I'd walk it surrounded by warriors who'd seen me at my worst and still called me family. The girl from Iowa who'd run from expectations had become something beyond anyone's imagining. Tomorrow I'd marry the man who saw all of me and loved me anyway. And somehow, despite everything, my family would be there to witness it. Even if they still didn't understand who I'd become. The first battle erupted over save the dates. What should have been a simple decision became a full-scale family conflict conducted through tense phone calls and increasingly passive-aggressive emails. "Absolutely not." Dad's voice boomed through Mom's speakerphone. "No daughter of mine is having a military wedding. You'll have a proper church ceremony like your sisters did." I gripped my coffee mug tighter, sitting in Ryan's apartment while he made breakfast. We'd put Mom on speaker, hoping for enthusiasm. Instead, we got Frank Miller's unchanging opposition. "Dad, I'm a naval officer. A military wedding is appropriate." "Appropriate," he snorted. "What's appropriate is a white dress, not some masculine uniform. What will people think?" "I don't care what people think." "Well, I do. I have to live in this town after you go back to playing war games." Ryan placed a calming hand on my shoulder, but I could see his jaw tightening. He'd witnessed these calls before, each one following the same pattern. Dad's disapproval, Mom's attempts to mediate my growing frustration. "It's not playing frank," Mom interjected quietly. "She's served our country for 20 years. Don't start with me, Susan. Bad enough she throws away her youth on this nonsense. Now she wants to parade around in costume at her own wedding." "It's not a costume." The words exploded out before I could stop them. "It's a uniform I've bled for, that I've earned every thread of. But you wouldn't understand that, would you?" Silence crackled through the phone. Then Dad's voice, cold and final. "You do what you want. You always have. But don't expect me to smile while you make a mockery of everything a wedding should be." The line went dead. Ryan pulled me into his arms as angry tears threatened. "Hey, we're doing this our way, remember?" "I know, I keep hoping he'll change." "People change when they're ready, not when we need them to." He kissed my forehead. "Now let's look at those venue options Morrison sent over." My sister's reactions were more subtle, but equally cutting. Amy called under the pretense of offering help, but her real agenda became clear quickly. "I still have my wedding dress," she gushed. "It's only been worn once, and we're almost the same size. You could save so much money." "That's kind Amy, but I'm wearing my dress whites." "Oh," disappointment dripped from the single syllable. "Well, what about bridesmaids? Jessica and I have matching dresses from Cousin Sarah's wedding." "I'm not having traditional bridesmaids. My teammates will be standing with me." "Your teammates, men?" "My Seal brothers, yes." The judgment in her silence was deafening. "Chastity, I know you've always been different, but this is your wedding. Don't you want to feel like a princess for one day?" "I want to feel like myself." Jessica's call came next, tag-teaming disapproval disguised as concern. "Dad's really upset. He's been telling everyone you're having a small private ceremony because you're embarrassed about something." "Embarrassed? We're having 200 guests." 200 soldiers, she corrected. "It's not the same as family and real friends." The implication that my brothers and sisters in arms weren't real friends burned like acid. These were people who'd trusted me with their lives, who'd bled beside me, who'd shown up when blood family failed. But salvation came from an unexpected source. 2 weeks into planning, Senator Hayes invited us to dinner at his Georgetown home. What I expected to be a casual meal turned into a strategic planning session. "I've been thinking about your wedding," he announced over appetizers. "Given the guest list and the significance, we should consider enhanced arrangements." "Dad," Ryan warned, "we discussed keeping it simple. 200 military personnel, including flag officers, is hardly simple." The senator pulled out a leather folder. "I've taken the liberty of making some inquiries." Inside were photographs of the Naval Academy Chapel correspondence with the commandant and preliminary security assessments. He'd essentially begun planning a state event without telling us. "Senator Hayes," I began carefully, "we appreciate this, but—" "William," he corrected. "Family calls me William. And before you object, hear me out. This isn't just your wedding, though that alone would warrant extraordinary measures. This is history." He laid out his vision with military precision. The first female Navy SEAL marrying at the Academy Chapel. Honor guards from multiple services. A reception that would bring together warriors and healers, those who wage war and those who repair its damage. "Your father objects to military traditions." William's eyes gleamed. "Then we'll show him what those traditions really mean. Not costume play, but centuries of honor, sacrifice, and service crystallized into ceremony." Ryan groaned. "Dad, you're not using Chastity's wedding to make a political point." "Political?" William looked genuinely offended. "Son, this is about respect. If Chastity's family won't provide it, then by God, the United States Navy will." What followed was surreal. William Hayes, one of the most powerful men in Washington, personally called my parents. I never learned exactly what was said, but Mom called afterward, breathless with awe. A senator, A real senator called about your wedding." She paused. "Your father actually stood up straight while they talked. I haven't seen him do that since his discharge physical." The next surprise came from my team. I'd casually mentioned the family drama during a briefing trying to explain why I was distracted. Within hours, Walsh had convened what he called a tactical wedding planning session. "Listen up," he announced to 3 teams' worth of SEALs. "Miller's family is giving her grief about having a military wedding. Anyone think our sister should hide who she is on her big day?" The response was immediate and unanimous profanity. That's what I thought, so here's what we're going to do. What emerged was equal parts touching and terrifying. Every SEAL who'd ever operated with me requested leave for the wedding date. Guys flew in from active deployments using precious vacation days. They organized hotels, transportation, and what Rodriguez called family education services. "We'll show them what military traditions mean," he promised. Respectfully, mostly. The gesture that broke me came from an unexpected place. Admiral Morrison's wife, Helen, called one afternoon while I was reviewing seating charts. "Chastity, dear, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. James mentioned you were handling wedding planning without much family support." "I'm managing, ma'am." "I'm sure you are. You've managed things that would break most people. But planning a wedding shouldn't be a solo operation. Would you like some help?" She became my surrogate mother of the bride, handling details with grace and experience. When vendors tried to overcharge the military bride, Helen's steel magnolia persona emerged. When I struggled with protocol for mixing military and civilian guests, she navigated it seamlessly. "Your mother should be doing this," she said one day while we addressed invitations. "But since she can't or won't consider me your backup—" "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. "You barely know me." "I know you saved my son's life. I know you've served with distinction while facing obstacles my husband's generation can barely imagine. And I know what it's like to be a military woman in a world that doesn't quite know what to do with us." She patted my hand. "You deserve to have your day your way." 3 weeks before the wedding, things reached a crescendo. Dad called with an ultimatum, "Wear a dress, or he wouldn't attend." "Fine," I heard myself say, surprising us both. "Don't come." "What?" I said, "Don't come, Dad. I've spent 20 years trying to earn your approval for who I am instead of who you wanted me to be. I'm done. If you can't support me wearing the uniform I've earned with blood and sacrifice, then I don't want you there. You'd choose strangers over family. I'm choosing people who see me, Dad, who respect me, who don't spend every interaction trying to force me into a box I don't fit in." My voice stayed steady despite the tears. "I love you, but I won't shrink myself anymore. Not even for you." The silence stretched before he spoke again, voice rough. "Your mother will still come. She's welcome. Anyone who can support my choices is welcome." After hanging up, I sat in the quiet of my quarters processing what had just happened. I'd drawn a line 20 years in the making. It hurt more than any physical wound I'd endured. Ryan found me there an hour later, having received my text. He didn't speak, just held me while I finally let myself mourn the father I'd never have. "Did I do the right thing?" I whispered. "You stood up for yourself. That's always right." 2 days later, a package arrived. No note, but inside was a shadow box containing military memorabilia. Dad's service pins his marksman badge, a faded photograph of him in dress blues before his injury. At the bottom, barely visible, was a newspaper clipping from my Trident graduation, the first article about me he'd saved. I called Mom immediately. "Did Dad send this?" "He's been in the garage for days," she said carefully, "building something, working through things in his own way." "Is he coming to the wedding?" "I don't know, sweetheart, but that box, that's him trying. Maybe not the way you need, but the only way he knows how." The final preparations continued. My dress whites were tailored to perfection, bearing my new rank and every earned decoration. The blue sapphire trident from my brothers would rest above my heart. Dad's Vietnam service pin would be attached to my bouquet, carried if not worn. Whatever happened, I'd walk down that aisle as myself, fully, proudly, surrounded by those who'd never asked me to be less than everything I was. The war was over. I'd chosen my ground and held it. Now all that remained was to see who would stand with me when the day came. The Pentagon's halls seemed to stretch forever as I followed Admiral Morrison's aide through security checkpoints I'd never seen before. My original orders had simply stated, "Report to conference room 2A at 1400. But this felt far more significant than a routine briefing. "Right through here, Commander," the aide said, opening a door marked with classification warnings. Inside, the Joint Chiefs of Staff sat around a polished table, every branch of service represented at the highest level. My throat went dry as they all turned to look at me. Whatever this was, it was bigger than I'd imagined. "Commander Miller." Admiral Morrison stood, his expression unreadable. "Please have a seat." I sat ramrod straight, hands folded, mind racing through possible scenarios. Had something gone wrong? Was there an investigation I didn't know about? General Patricia Williams, the first female member of the Joint Chiefs, spoke first. "Commander, do you know why you're here?" "No, ma'am." "You're here because we failed you." Her words landed like artillery shells. "For 20 years, you've served with distinction. You've broken barriers, saved lives, led operations that textbooks will study for decades. And for most of that time, the system failed to recognize your contributions appropriately." Admiral Thompson from Personnel Command opened a thick folder. My service record, but thicker than I remembered. Much thicker. Captain Elijah Richards. He began the name, making my jaw clench. "Your former superior during multiple promotion cycles, currently under investigation for systemic discrimination and conduct unbecoming. Would you like to know what we found?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Every single promotion packet you submitted was altered before reaching review boards, achievements minimized, negative performance evaluations that were never filed officially but somehow appeared in your record, recommendations from superior officers that mysteriously vanished." His voice hardened. "You should have been promoted to chief 5 years earlier. Your commission should have come 7 years ago. As for your current rank..." General Williams took over. "We've reviewed comparable service records from your peers, male SEALs with half your operational experience, fewer decorations, and lesser leadership evaluations who are now captains or even flag officers. The discrimination was systematic, deliberate, and stops today." My hands trembled slightly as the full weight of their words sank in. Years of being passed over, of watching less qualified people advance, of wondering if I simply wasn't good enough despite everything I'd achieved. And all along, it had been deliberate sabotage. "Richards," I managed to ask. "Forced retirement pending criminal charges," Morrison said with satisfaction. "He won't hurt anyone else's career." "But we can't give you back those years," General Williams continued. "What we can do is make it right going forward. Effective immediately, you're promoted to captain with a date of rank backdated 2 years to when you should have received it." Captain, 06. The rank seemed impossible even as she said it. "There's more," Admiral Thompson added. "Your service record qualifies you for flag rank consideration. The Secretary of the Navy has approved advancing you to Rear Admiral lower half as soon as administrative requirements are complete, within the year." The room spun. From commander to admiral in one conversation. It wasn't how the military worked, except apparently when correcting egregious wrongs. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll continue serving." General Williams smiled for the first time. "The Navy needs officers like you in positions where you can effect real change, where you can ensure what happened to you doesn't happen to other deserving sailors." Morrison stood walking to a side table where a garment bag waited. "We took the liberty of having new uniforms prepared. Your promotion ceremony is in 30 minutes. 30 minutes? Quiet ceremony given your operational security requirements, but official, legal, and long overdue." He handed me the bag. "There's a changing room next door. Take your time." Alone in the changing room, I stared at the captain's eagles waiting to replace my commander's oak leaves. 4 stripes for the sleeves. The weight of 20 years of fighting not just enemies overseas, but bias at home settled on my shoulders. A knock interrupted my thoughts. "It's Patricia," General Williams called. "May I—" She entered, closing the door behind her. Out of the formal setting, her expression softened. "I wanted a moment alone," she said. "Woman to woman. I know what you're feeling. The anger at lost years. The imposter syndrome hitting because the promotion feels too fast even though it's actually too late. The weight of representing every woman who'll come after you." "How did you know?" "Because I lived it. Different branch, different era, same battle. Can I help with the insignia?" Together we attached the captain's eagles to my uniform. Her hands were steady where mine shook. "Richards wasn't the only one," she said quietly. "He was just the most egregious. We're cleaning house across all branches. Your case broke it open. Your reputation, your record was so stellar that when investigators started looking, the discrimination was undeniable." "Why didn't anyone stop it sooner?" "Because people like Richards are good at working the system, playing the game just within regulations while destroying careers. But he got greedy with you, blocked too much too obviously. When Admiral Morrison started asking questions after you saved his son, it created a ripple effect." She stepped back, examining the completed uniform. "Perfect. Now let's make history. Again." The ceremony was small but powerful. The service chiefs, Admiral Morrison, and a handful of others witnessed as I took the oath for my new rank. No family, no fanfare, just the weight of justice finally served. Captain Miller, the Secretary of the Navy himself, said afterward, "Your wedding is in 2 weeks." "Yes, sir." "Wear your new rank proudly. You've more than earned it." He paused. "And prepare yourself. Your story is going to inspire thousands of sailors, particularly women who've been told they can't or shouldn't." That evening, I sat in my car outside Ryan's hospital, trying to process everything. My phone buzzed with a text from Walsh. "Heard through the grapevine, Captain Miller. About damn time. The boys are buying drinks tonight." Ryan emerged from his shift, exhausted from a 15-hour surgery. He slid into the passenger seat, then did a double take at my new insignia. "Captain," his eyes widened. How did?" I told him everything. Richard sabotaged the investigation, the retroactive promotion, the flag rank waiting in the wings. He listened without interrupting his expression, cycling through anger, pride, and protective fury. "That bastard stole years from you," he said finally. "Promotions you earned, positions you deserved, money you should have made. But I still did the missions, still saved lives, still proved them wrong." I touched the eagles on my collar. "And now I'll be in a position to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." "Admiral Miller," he tried the title, smiling. "My wife the Admiral. Your father's head might actually explode." The thought sobered me. In 2 weeks, I'd walk down the aisle wearing captain's eagles that should have been mine years ago, with Admiral stars waiting in the future. Dad would see it as more evidence of my choosing career over family. He'd never understand that without the career, without proving myself against every obstacle, I wouldn't be the person worthy of the love I'd found. Let him be shocked, I decided. I'm done dimming my light to make others comfortable. 3 days later, another package arrived. This one was official Navy correspondence, but the contents were personal. Letters from female sailors across the fleet. Somehow word had leaked about my promotion and its circumstances. "Dear Captain Miller," one young petty officer wrote, "I've been fighting for recognition in my rate for 3 years. Knowing what you overcame gives me hope." "Ma'am," a chief wrote, "I've got 3 daughters. Because of officers like you, I can tell them the Navy will value their service." Letter after letter from women who'd faced their own Richards, their own blocked promotions, their own battles for recognition. They saw my victory as theirs, my rank as proof that the system could be forced to change. A knock on my quarters door interrupted my reading. Master Chief Reynolds stood outside the man who'd first trained me at Budus, who doubted me, then defended me. "Captain," he said formally, then broke into a rare smile. "Heard you're getting married in dress whites with proper rank finally showing." "Master Chief." "Also heard your family's giving you static about it." He shifted uncomfortable with emotional territory. "My daughter just commissioned, Nurse Corps. She's got my stubbornness and her mother's brains. Thing is, I almost talked her out of joining." "Why?" "Because I'd seen how the Navy treated women. Didn't want her facing that." He met my eyes. "Then I watched you. Saw you take everything we threw at you and ask for more. Saw you prove every bias wrong through sheer will and competence. Made me realize I was part of the problem, assuming she couldn't instead of making sure she could." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small box. "She wanted you to have this at your wedding. Says you're the reason she knew she could serve." Inside was a simple pin, first-generation military woman. His daughter's note read, "Because of you, I wasn't the only one. Tell her I'll wear it with pride." I managed through a tight throat. After he left, I sat surrounded by evidence of impact I'd never intended. Every barrier broken had cleared the path for others. Every promotion earned despite discrimination had proved it possible. The captain's eagles on my collar weren't just personal victory, but collective triumph. Ryan found me there hours later, still reading letters. He took in the scene, the scattered correspondence, the tears I hadn't bothered to hide. "You okay?" "They stole years from me," I said. "But maybe those years of fighting made this moment possible. If I'd been promoted on schedule, would anyone have investigated would Richard still be there blocking other women? Everything happens for a reason." He sat beside me, gathering letters gently. "No. Some things are just wrong, but we can make meaning from them. Create purpose from pain." I held up the letters. "These women see possibility because I survived impossibility. That matters." "Admiral Miller, philosopher of war," he teased gently. "Just Captain Miller for now." I corrected, then smiled. "But give me a year." The stolen promotions had been returned with interest. In 2 weeks, I'd stand at my wedding wearing rank that told the true story of my service. And somewhere in the crowd, my father would have to see his daughter, not as she could have been, but as she actually was. The Navy's first female SEAL, captain, soon to be admiral, and finally recognized for every mountain climbed and barrier broken along the way. Dawn broke gray and misty over Annapolis, painting the Naval Academy grounds in watercolor softness. I'd barely slept, but not from nerves. SEALs don't get nervous. We get ready. My quarters at the bachelor officers' quarters felt too quiet after years of team rooms and forward bases. On the desk sat 3 uniforms, my dress whites pristine and waiting, my working blues as backup, and the combat utilities I'd worn through 7 deployments folded with care I usually reserved for weapons maintenance. A soft knock broke the silence. "It's me." Mom's voice came through the door. I let her in, surprised she'd arrived so early. The ceremony wasn't for 6 hours. She carried a worn leather bag and looked smaller than I remembered, as if the years of mediating between Dad and me had physically diminished her. "Couldn't sleep either?" I asked. Not a wink. She set the bag on my desk hands, trembling slightly. "I brought something. Several somethings, actually." The first item she withdrew made my breath catch. Dad's Navy photographs from Vietnam, ones I'd never seen. Young Frank Miller in dress blues, proud and strong before the training accident that ended his career 3 months into service. His face held the same determination I saw in my mirror every morning. "He was so excited," Mom said softly. "Grew up poor, saw the Navy as his chance to be something more. When the injury happened during a training exercise, medical discharge, his only option, it broke something in him. He never told me he was injured in training. Too ashamed. Felt he'd failed before even getting a chance to serve properly. Came home to Iowa, married me, had you girls. but he never stopped feeling like he'd let everyone down. She touched one photo gently. When you joined, it was like watching his dream and his nightmare combined. Pride that you'd picked up where he left off, terror that you'd fail like he did, or worse, that you'd succeed where he couldn't. The next items were his service documents. I read through them, seeing my father's story properly for the first time. Honor graduate from basic training, selected for advanced electronics school. Glowing evaluations before the accident that crushed 3 vertebrae and left him with permanent limitations. Why didn't he ever tell me this? Because Frank Miller doesn't do vulnerable. He does angry, stubborn, protective, but not vulnerable. Mom pulled out another envelope. This came yesterday. He doesn't know I took it. Inside was a printed email to Dad from someone named Marcus Webb. It took me a moment to place the name one of his construction crew. The email contained a link to a news article about my promotion to captain, with Webb's note, "Boss saw this about your daughter. You must be so proud. What an incredible achievement." Dad's response, sent at 3 a.m, was brief. "She earned it. Every bit of it. Frank." "He's trying," Mom said. "In his broken way, he's trying to understand who you've become, but 20 years of patterns don't change overnight." "Is he coming today?" "I don't know, sweetheart. He put on his suit this morning, then took it off, then put it on again. He was sitting in the garage when I left holding that shadow box he sent you." A harder knock interrupted us. "Miller, you decent!" Walsh's voice boomed through the door. I opened it to find my entire team in the hallway dress uniforms, already sharp grins wide. "Tradition states the groom's not supposed to see the bride before the wedding," Rodriguez announced. "Nothing about the bride's brothers. We're here for inspection preparation and general harassment." They flooded in, filling my small quarters with their energy. Someone produced coffee and pastries from the academy mess. Lopez set up a portable speaker, filling the space with classic rock. It should have felt like chaos, but instead felt like home. Ma'am Walsh addressed my mother formally. "We're honored you're here. Your daughter saved most of our lives at least once. We're hoping to return the favor by making sure she looks squared away for the big day." Mom's eyes widened as 6 Navy SEALs began fussing over uniform preparations, with the intensity usually reserved for weapons checks. Rodriguez steamed wrinkles from my whites, while Jensen polished my shoes to mirror brightness. Thompson checked ribbon placement with a ruler. "The trident goes exactly here." Walsh measured from my collar, "and the blue one from the team's gets positioned." He paused, looking at my ribbons. "Hold up. These aren't the right ones." He was correct. My ribbon rack still showed commander's insignia, not the captain's updates I'd received 3 days ago. "I haven't had time to update them," I admitted. "Unacceptable," Walsh declared. "Lopez, you brought the spare ribbons." "Always prepared, Chief." What followed was a masterclass in military precision. They rebuilt my ribbon rack from scratch, each decoration placed perfectly. Navy cross on top, silver star below, bronze stars in their row. The combat action ribbon that represented first blood. Campaign medals from conflicts most people couldn't pronounce. "There." Walsh stepped back. "Now you look like the warrior you are." Mom watched it all with fascination. These men who jumped from airplanes and stormed enemy compounds were debating the exact angle of my shoulder boards with artistic intensity. "You're her family too," she said quietly to Walsh. "Yes, ma'am, the kind you choose by bleeding together." Another knock brought Helen Morrison, the Admiral's wife, carrying a garment bag and wearing the determined expression of a woman on a mission. "Gentlemen, Mrs. Miller." She nodded regally. "I need the room. Female preparations require privacy." The SEALs filed out with exaggerated groans about being evicted. Walsh paused at the door. "We'll be right outside if you need us. And Miller, that thing we discussed, it's all arranged. Trust the plan." After they left, Helen unzipped the garment bag, revealing not clothing but accessories. A hairstyling kit that looked professional grade, makeup selected specifically for photography under military lighting, small touches that wouldn't violate uniform regulations but would ensure I looked polished. "You don't need any of this." she said, arranging items on the desk. "You're beautiful as you are, but weddings are theater, and we're going to make sure you own that stage." As she worked on my hair, pinning it into a style that was regulation perfect, but somehow elegant, she talked about her own military wedding 40 years ago. "Different era," she mused. "I was a Navy nurse. Jim was fresh from SEAL qualification. My parents were horrified I'd chosen someone in special operations. His parents were confused why he'd marry someone with her own career. We proved them all wrong, one deployment at a time. How did you manage it? The separations, the secrets, the fear." "By remembering that extraordinary love requires extraordinary understanding. Your Ryan gets that. I've watched him at events, how he looks at you. He sees your strength as something to celebrate, not compete with." Mom had been quiet during this exchange, but now spoke up. "I never got that. With Frank, I mean. He needed me to be less so. He could feel like more. I let myself shrink to fit his vision." She met my eyes in the mirror. "I'm so proud you refused to do the same." A text arrived from Ryan. "Banished to the other side of campus by your brothers. They take this tradition seriously. Can't wait to see you. All my love." "Smart man," Helen approved. "Now let's talk about the ceremony additions." "Additions." She smiled mysteriously. "Admiral Morrison may have made some arrangements. Nothing that changes your vision, just enhancements. Trust us." By the time she finished, I looked like myself, but elevated. The hair perfectly secured subtle makeup that would last through tears and Maryland humidity. Mom added the final touch, pinning Dad's Vietnam service pin to the bouquet of white roses and blue delphiniums. "Whether he's there or not, part of him will walk with you," she said. A commotion in the hallway preceded another visitor. Admiral Morrison himself in full dress, whites with enough ribbons to stock a craft store. "Captain Miller," he said formally, then grinned. "Ready to make history again." "Sir." First female SEAL to have a full military wedding at the academy. First to wear captain's eagles earned in combat to her own ceremony. First to have representatives from every special operations unit in attendance. He paused dramatically. "And first to have what's waiting outside." Through the window, I could see the academy grounds filling with people. But not just any people. Uniforms from every service branch. Army Special Forces in their green berets, Marine Raiders in dress blues, Air Force Pararescue in their distinctive maroon, and everywhere SEALs. So many SEALs. "Sir, how many—" "Last count 150 operators who've served with you or been impacted by your service. They started arriving yesterday. Some flew in from active deployments." His expression grew serious. "They're here to stand witness, to show your family what their daughter means to the Brotherhood." My throat tightened. I don't know what to say. "You don't have to say anything. You've already said it all through 20 years of service. Today we answer back." He left with promises to see me at the chapel. Mom and Helen began gathering the final items, but I needed one more moment. At my desk, I opened the drawer containing letters from female sailors, my first challenge coin, and a photo from Hell Week of my boat crew carrying logs through the surf. A final knock gentler than the others. I opened the door to find a young female ensign in dress whites, ribbons, sparse but stance proud. "Ma'am," she said nervously, "I'm Ensign Sarah Blackwood. I'm sorry to intrude, but I'm commissioning next month as the next female accepted to Bud S. I just wanted to see you, to know it's real." I stepped aside, letting her enter. She looked around the quarters, taking in the uniforms, the preparations, the evidence of a career that had broken barriers. "It's real," I assured her, "and it's going to be the hardest thing you've ever do. They'll expect you to fail. Some will want you to fail, but you'll have something I didn't." "What's that, ma'am?" "Proof that it's possible, and an entire community who knows you belong." I straightened her ribbon rack automatically. "When you graduate, find me. We'll have coffee and swap stories." Her eyes shone. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am." After she left, Mom took my hands. "You just changed that girl's life. Probably dozens of lives today alone." "Then maybe it's all been worth it." "Oh, sweetheart," she squeezed gently. "It was always worth it. Some of us just took longer to see it." The clock showed 90 minutes until ceremony time. Somewhere across campus, Ryan was preparing with his groomsmen. In the chapel, hundreds of warriors gathered to witness something unprecedented. And somewhere in Iowa, my father sat in his garage, wrestling with 20 years of stubborn pride. I put on my whites with the same care I'd donned combat gear for missions, each item precisely placed, each medal earned in blood and determination. The captain's eagles gleaming on my collar, finally telling the truth of my service. "How do I look?" I asked Mom and Helen. "Like yourself," Mom said simply. "Finally, completely unapologetically yourself." Outside, I could hear my brothers gathering their voices, carrying through Academy grounds. 150 of America's finest warriors come to stand for one of their own. Whatever happened next, I wouldn't face it alone. The scared girl from Iowa was gone. In her place stood Captain Chastity Miller, ready to walk toward her future, with the full weight of her past worn proudly on her shoulders. Time to make history, again. The Naval Academy Chapel stood like a white beacon against the September sky, its copper dome gleaming in the afternoon sun. From the parking area, I could see guests already filing in a river of dress uniforms from every service branch. My heart hammered with anticipation as Helen Morrison's driver navigated through the security checkpoint. Deep breaths. Mom coached from beside me, though her own hands trembled in her lap. "You faced worse than this." She was wrong. Combat was simpler. In combat, you knew who the enemy was. As we pulled up to the designated arrival area, I saw him immediately. Dad stood near the chapel entrance in his one good suit, the charcoal gray one he wore to funerals and court dates. His face was set in familiar lines of disapproval, jaw clenched as he surveyed the military crowd with obvious disdain. "He came," Mom breathed. "To make a scene." I predicted already, stealing myself. Helen's driver opened our door and I stepped out in full dress whites, every ribbon and medal precisely placed. The September breeze caught the fabric and I heard a subtle shift in the crowd's energy. Heads turned. Conversations paused. Someone whispered, "That's her, Captain Miller." Dad's gaze found me across the distance. His eyes traveled from my white shoes up to the captain's eagles on my shoulders, pausing at the rows of ribbons on my chest. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Then his expression hardened into the familiar mask of disappointment. I walked toward the chapel entrance with Mom and Helen flanking me, maintaining military bearing, despite the emotional ambush waiting ahead. Other guests stepped aside, creating a natural pathway. I caught glimpses of faces I recognized, teammates from various operations, medical staff who'd patched me up, intelligence officers who'd provided crucial data for missions. Dad intercepted us at the steps. "So, you're really doing this," he said without preamble, "parading around in costume like you're someone important." Frank, Mom warned. "No, Susan, our daughter needs to hear this." He squared up to me close enough that I could smell his aftershave, the same Old Spice he'd worn my entire life. "You think this makes you special? Playing dress-up with your military friends? A real woman would be in a wedding dress, showing respect for tradition, for family, for God's plan." His voice rose with each word, drawing attention from nearby guests. I saw Walsh and Rodriguez moving closer, protective instincts engaged. But I held up a subtle hand, keeping them back. This was my fight. "Are you finished?" I asked quietly when he paused for breath. "I'm just getting started. 20 years of this nonsense, and now you want to contaminate your wedding day with it too? Your sisters had proper weddings, white dresses, church ceremonies, normal celebrations. But you," he gestured dismissively at my uniform, "you always have to be different. Always have to prove something." "What exactly am I proving, Dad?" "That you're better than us. Better than the life we gave you." His face flushed darker. "Too good for Iowa. Too good for a normal life. Too good to give me grandchildren or be a proper daughter." The chapel doors opened behind him. I couldn't see inside from this angle, but Dad was positioned perfectly to view the interior. Whatever he saw made his words die mid-sentence. "Sir." A young Marine in dress blues appeared at the door. "We're ready for the bride's arrival." Dad turned back to me, mouth still open to continue his tirade, when a voice rang out from inside the chapel. "Admiral on deck." The response was instantaneous and thunderous. The sound of 300 boots hitting the floor in perfect unison echoed across the grounds. Through the open doors, I glimpsed the impossible, every single person in the chapel on their feet at attention. But that wasn't what stopped Dad cold. It was what happened next. From the chapel entrance, they filed out in perfect formation. Navy SEALs in dress whites, Army Special Forces in their distinctive green berets, Marine Raiders, Air Force Pararescue, row after row of America's most elite warriors forming up on either side of the chapel steps. 150 special operators creating an honor corridor that stretched from the chapel to where I stood. Walsh stepped forward from the Formation Voice Parade Ground, strong Naval Special Warfare Team 3, present and accounted for. Another SEAL followed, Team 5 present and accounted for. Team 7 all present. Marine Special Operations Regiment 2nd Battalion reporting. Army 5th Special Forces Group standing by. Each unit commander announced their presence voices carrying across the academy grounds. These weren't just individuals who'd happened to attend, these were organized units teams who'd taken leave together, traveled together, stood together. Dad staggered backward a step, face draining of color as he processed the scene. His gaze swung between the formations and me mouth working soundlessly. Admiral Morrison emerged from the chapel in full dress uniform, his chest bearing even more ribbons than mine. He walked directly to me, ignoring Dad entirely. "Captain Miller," he said formally, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your command is assembled and awaiting your arrival." "My command, Admiral." A slight smile touched his weathered face. "Every operator here has served with you, been saved by you, or inspired by you. They've requested the honor of standing witness to your marriage." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "We've had presidents and foreign dignitaries married in this chapel, Captain, but we've never had this many warriors volunteer to attend. You've united the special operations community in a way I've never seen." He turned slightly, finally acknowledging Dad's presence. "Mr. Miller, I presume I'm Admiral James Morrison, Commander, Naval Special Warfare. Your daughter saved my son's life in Afghanistan. She's also personally responsible for rescuing over 200 civilians from combat zones, eliminating threats to national security I can't discuss, and paving the way for every woman who will follow her into special operations." Dad's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound emerged. Morrison continued relentlessly. "The ribbons on her chest represent valor most people can't imagine. That Navy Cross awarded for actions so classified, we can't tell you what she did, only that she saved an entire platoon. The Silver Star earned while wounded, continuing to fight while bleeding out to ensure her team's survival. Each ribbon is a story of courage that would break lesser people." I didn't. Dad's voice came out strangled. "No, sir, you didn't know, because Captain Miller never told you. Heroes rarely brag about their heroism." Morrison's tone carried judgment wrapped in military courtesy. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a ceremony to commence." But the surprises weren't done. Senator Hayes appeared next, somehow managing to look both paternal and politically powerful in his tailored suit. "Ah, Mr. Miller," he said smoothly. "William Hayes. I've heard so much about you from Chastity, all she's overcome to get here today." The subtle emphasis on overcome wasn't lost on anyone. "As chairman of the Armed Services Committee, I want to personally thank you for raising such an exceptional American hero. The nation owes you a debt for your daughter's service." Dad looked like he'd been hit by a truck. The The construction foreman who ruled his small domain with iron authority was suddenly faced with power he couldn't comprehend. Admirals and senators speaking to him, 300 warriors standing at attention, his youngest daughter at the center of it all. Amy and Jessica had arrived at some point hovering near the parking area. Their faces showed the same shock as Dad's mascara, already running as they took in the scene. "Chastity," Jessica called out tentatively. Are all these people here for you?" Rodriguez couldn't help himself. "Every one of us, ma'am. Your sister's a legend in our community." "The ghost of Kandahar," someone called out from formation. "Angel of Ramadi," another voice added. "First female trident. Best point operator in the teams." The tributes came from throughout the formation warriors, who never praised lightly, offering testimonies to my service. Each declaration hit Dad like a physical blow truth, destroying 20 years of dismissive assumptions. "Enough," I said quietly, but my voice carried. The tributes stopped instantly. "Thank you all for being here, for standing with me, for showing my family who you've allowed me to become." I looked directly at Dad. "This isn't costume play. This isn't pretense. This is who I am, who I've always been, even when you couldn't see it." The formations remained perfectly still, 300 warriors bearing witness to a different kind of battle, the personal kind that left different scars. Mom stepped forward, taking Dad's arm. "Frank, we should take our seats." He resisted for a moment, still staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Then his gaze dropped to the shadow box he'd been carrying, his own military memorabilia, the remnants of dreams cut short by injury and circumstance. "Your medals," he said hoarsely, "they're real." "Everyone earned Sir Walsh confirmed from the formation. Your daughter's the finest officer I've ever served with." Something broke in Dad's expression. The anger that had sustained him for 20 years cracked, revealing something raw underneath. Fear, pride, regret, all warring for dominance. He stopped, started again. "I need to sit down." Mom guided him toward the chapel entrance, but he paused at the first row of seals. His hand trembled as he raised it to his forehead in an unpracticed salute. Not to them, but toward me. The gesture was clumsy, incorrect in form, but devastating in intent. Frank Miller, who'd been denied his chance to serve, saluting the daughter who'd exceeded his abandoned dreams. I returned the salute properly, holding it until he dropped his hand and stumbled into the chapel. "Well," Admiral Morrison said after a moment, "that was educational. Shall we proceed with your entrance, Captain?" The formations shifted, creating the honor corridor I'd walk through, but I needed one more moment. At the bottom of the steps, I turned to face the assembled warriors. "Thank you," I said simply, "for answering the call, for standing up, for being my family when blood wasn't enough." "Hoo-yah!" The response thundered across the academy grounds, 300 voices united. I began the walk through the corridor of heroes, each face a memory, a mission, a moment when we'd trusted each other with everything. These men and women had seen me at my worst and best. They'd never questioned my worth, only supported my growth. Inside the chapel, every pew was packed. The civilian guests, Ryan's medical colleagues and family friends, were vastly outnumbered by uniforms. But on the front row, Dad sat slumped between Mom and Amy, still clutching his shadow box like a lifeline. He looked up as I passed, and for the first time in 20 years, I saw my father truly see me. Not the daughter he'd wanted, or the woman he'd tried to force me to become, but Captain Chastity Miller, naval officer, special operator, warrior. The recognition broke him. Tears ran down his weathered face as he mouthed 2 words. "I'm sorry." 20 years too late, but something. I nodded acknowledgement and continued to the altar where Ryan waited, his smile bright enough to guide ships home. Behind me, 150 warriors filed into standing room-only positions along the walls. My brothers in arms surrounding me with their presence, their protection, their pride. Whatever happened next, I'd proven everything that needed proving. Not to him, but to myself. The rest was just ceremony. The chapel fell into expectant silence as I reached the altar. Ryan's hand found mine warm and steady, grounding me in the moment. Reverend Captain Thomas, the Naval Academy chaplain, smiled warmly as he prepared to begin the ceremony. But Admiral Morrison stepped forward first, moving to the pulpit with purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, his voice filled the sacred space. Before we begin this joyous union, I've been asked to share something with you. In military tradition, we honor our own by telling their stories. Today you'll hear one that's been classified hidden and denied for too long. Dad shifted in his seat, Mom's hand clutching his arm. I felt Ryan squeeze my fingers gently, offering silent support for whatever was coming. Morrison continued. 20 years ago, a young woman from Iowa walked into a Navy recruiting station. She was told women couldn't be SEALs. She was told she'd wash out. She was told to find something more suitable. His gaze found Dad. She was told these things by many people, including those who should have supported her most. But Petty Officer 3rd Class Miller didn't listen. She reported to Bud S, where instructors tried to break her, where classmates bet on her failure, where every evolution was made harder because of her gender. She survived Hell Week. She earned her trident. She became what everyone said was impossible. Murmurs rippled through the civilian guests who didn't know this history. The military members remained stone-still, attention absolute. Then she deployed. Afghanistan first, a hostage rescue operation in Kandahar province. Morrison's voice took on a harder edge. 12 international aid workers held by Taliban forces, building rigged with explosives, guards using human shields. The assault team was pinned down, unable to advance without triggering devices that would kill everyone. I remembered that night with crystal clarity, the smell of cordite and fear, the weight of responsibility. Then Petty Officer Miller did something that shouldn't have been possible. She identified a structural weakness in the building's construction. While under fire, she scaled the exterior wall, entered through a damaged roof section, and eliminated 6 guards in absolute silence. She then guided the hostages out through the same route while her team provided cover. 12 lives saved, 6 enemy combatants eliminated, 0 friendly casualties. For this action, she received her first Bronze Star. She was 22 years old. Senator Hayes stood next, moving to join Morrison at the pulpit. If I may, Admiral... Please, Senator. Hayes faced the congregation with his politician's presence, but his words carried personal weight. I've served on the Armed Services Committee for 15 years. I've read thousands of service records. I've never seen one like Captain Miller's. He pulled out reading glasses and an official document. Operation Inherent Shield Syria. Captain Miller's team was tasked with eliminating a chemical weapons facility. During exfiltration, their helicopter was hit by ground fire. The pilot was killed instantly. The aircraft crashed in enemy territory. 5 team members severely injured, including the officer in charge. I closed my eyes, briefly feeling phantom pain from injuries long healed. Captain Miller, then a first-class petty officer, assumed command, despite a shattered collarbone and severe lacerations. She established a defensive position, administered medical aid, and coordinated close air support while fighting off repeated enemy assaults. When rescue arrived 6 hours later, every American was still alive. The chemical weapons facility was destroyed. 32 enemy fighters were confirmed killed, majority by Miller's direct action. For this, she received the Silver Star. The citation was edited down from a higher award due to administrative concerns. We now know those concerns were one man's prejudice against promoting a female SEAL. Gasps came from the civilian section. Amy had her hand pressed to her mouth. Jessica stared at me like she'd never seen me before. Dad sat, rigid, tears streaming down his face. But that's not why we're telling you this, Hayes continued. We're telling you because Captain Miller never has. In 20 years of extraordinary service, she's never once complained about missed promotions, denied recognition, or systemic discrimination. She simply continued serving, saving lives, protecting America's interests in places we can't even name. Admiral Morrison took over again. Ramadi, Iraq, Captain Miller identified and neutralized an entire insurgent cell, planning attacks on schools. 43 children's lives saved. Somalia. She led a raid that rescued a kidnapped American diplomat, carrying him 2 miles to extraction while wounded. Yemen. Classified operation that prevented, well, I can't tell you what it prevented, but Homeland Security was preserved. Lebanon. Syria again. Afghanistan multiple times, each deployment adding to a record of valor that stands unique in naval special warfare history. He paused, letting the weight settle over the chapel. Which brings us to one particular mission, Afghanistan Forward Operating Base Chapman. A routine patrol turned into complex ambush, multiple casualties. Among the wounded was Lieutenant James Morrison, my son. The Admiral's voice caught slightly. Helen Morrison in the front row wiped her eyes. He was exposed, bleeding out, direct enemy fire, making rescue impossible. Captain Miller, then Petty Officer Miller, broke cover, crossed 75 meters of open ground under heavy machine gun and RPG fire. She reached my son, threw him over her shoulders, and carried him to safety while engaging enemy positions. The medical officer said 5 more minutes would have been too late. My son lived because Captain Miller valued his life above her own. When I tried to thank her later, she said she was just doing her job, as if heroism were routine, as if sacrifice were standard operating procedure. Morrison stepped down from the pulpit, walked to where I stood, and did something that stopped my heart. He removed his own Navy Cross from his uniform and held it up. This was awarded to me for actions in Desert Storm. It pales compared to what you've earned. He turned to face the congregation. Captain Miller wears the Navy Cross, the service's second highest decoration. She should be wearing the Medal of Honor. The only reason she isn't is because the operation where she earned it remains classified. A sound escaped Dad's throat, audible in the chapel's acoustics. Raw pain mixed with pride too long denied. 47 successful operations. Morrison continued. Over 200 confirmed lives saved. First woman to complete SEAL training. First to deploy with teams. First to lead operations. And despite facing discrimination that would break most people, never once compromising her integrity or commitment. Senator Hayes returned to the pulpit. There's one more thing. Captain Miller, would you please stand and turn to face the congregation? I did feeling exposed in a way combat never achieved. 300 faces looked back at me, but I focused on my family. Mom openly weeping, Amy and Jessica clutching each other, and Dad stood. Slowly, painfully, like Atlas, shouldering the world. His shadow box fell forgotten to the pew as he raised his hand in a proper salute. This time, the form was correct. He'd been practicing. One by one, every military member in the chapel stood and saluted. 300 warriors rendering honors to one of their own. The civilian guests rose as well, hands over hearts, Ryan's medical colleagues who'd heard him speak of me, but never knew the full truth. Captain Chastity Miller. Senator Hayes said formally, "Your nation thanks you for your service, your sacrifices, your silence when you could have screamed about injustice, your persistence when everything said quit. You represent the best of America's warrior tradition." He nodded to someone in the back. The chapel doors opened and a Marine honor guard entered in perfect formation. They marched to the altar, executed precise facing movements, and presented arms. The lead Marine spoke in a voice that carried centuries of tradition. By order of the President of the United States and the Commandant of the Marine Corps, Captain Miller is hereby recognized as an honorary Marine Raider with all privileges and responsibilities thereof. He presented a ceremonial K-bar knife, the Marine's signature blade handle, first. For valor that transcends service boundaries, Semper Fidelis Captain. I accepted the blade with hands that barely trembled. Semper Fi Marine. The Army Special Forces commander stood next. By order of the Commanding General, United States Army Special Operations Command, Captain Miller is inducted as an honorary member of the Special Forces Regiment. He presented a green beret. For excellence that defines the warrior spirit, de oppresso liber. De oppresso liber, I echoed. The Air Force Pararescue Commander followed with their maroon beret, for saving lives under impossible conditions, that others may live. Each Special Operations Unit presented their symbols recognizing me as one of their own. The weight of tradition of acceptance of brotherhood extended across service lines, pressed down like a physical force. Through it all, Dad remained standing, saluting tears cutting channels down his weathered face. Finally, Admiral Morrison spoke again. Before we return to the joy at hand, there's one last order of business. He pulled out an official document. Captain Miller, by direction of the Secretary of the Navy, you are hereby meritoriously promoted to the rank of Rear Admiral Lower, half effective upon completion of administrative requirements. Congratulations, Admiral Select Miller. The chapel erupted. Warriors who'd faced death without flinching cheered and applauded. Shouts of hoo-yah and hoo-ah mixed with Marine auras in a thunder of celebration. I stood frozen, unable to process. Admiral. They were making me an admiral. The youngest female flag officer in Navy history. From seaman recruit to admiral in 20 years, despite every obstacle. Through the noise, I heard one sound clearly. A broken sob from the front row. Dad had collapsed back into his pew, head in his hands, shoulders, shaking with 20 years of suppressed emotion. Morrison raised his hand for silence. Now then, Chaplain Thomas, I believe we have a wedding to conduct. As the honor guard withdrew and people resumed their seats, I caught Dad's eye. He looked destroyed and rebuilt simultaneously, like a man who'd discovered his entire worldview was wrong, but found something better in the wreckage. I see you, he mouthed silently. I finally see you. I nodded once, then turned back to Ryan, who'd waited patiently through military tradition and family catharsis. Hi, I whispered. Hi yourself, Admiral Select, he grinned. Ready to get married? Never been more ready for anything in my life. Chaplain Thomas cleared his throat, smile warm despite the emotional tempest we'd weathered. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. The ceremony could finally begin. But everything had already changed. The recognition I'd never sought had been given. The father I'd lost to pride had been found in humility. The family that never understood had finally seen. All it had taken was 300 warriors standing witness to truth, too long hidden. The traditional wedding ceremony flowed with military precision. Ryan and I exchanged vows while 300 warriors bore witness their presence, transforming the sacred space into something beyond a chapel. This was a brotherhood, a sisterhood, a family forged in sacrifice. I, Ryan, take you, Chastity, to be my wife. His voice carried clear and strong. To stand beside you in peace and in war, to honor your service as you honor mine, to love the warrior and the woman with equal devotion. Through the blur of joy, I remained aware of movement in the front row. Dad sat hunched forward, shoulders shaking with silent sobs, while Mom rubbed his back in gentle circles. 20 years of rigid control had finally shattered. I, Chastity, take you, Ryan, to be my husband, to share my victories and my scars, to trust you with secrets I can't speak and truths I can't hide, to build a life where both our callings find home. Chaplain Thomas smiled warmly as we completed the traditional exchanges. The rings, please. But as Ryan's best man stepped forward, a disturbance rippled through the congregation. Dad was standing again, swaying slightly, hand raised like a student desperate to be called upon. Sir, Chaplain Thomas inquired gently, is everything all right? No. Dad's voice cracked. Nothing's all right. I need to say something. Mom tried to pull him back down, whispering urgently. Amy and Jessica looked mortified. The military members tensed, ready to intervene if needed. I felt Ryan's hand tighten on mine. Dad, I started. Please. he interrupted the word broken glass in his throat. 20 years I've waited. 20 years I've been wrong. Let me. Admiral Morrison rose from his position. Mr. Miller, perhaps this could wait until the reception. No. The word exploded out with surprising force. Dad gripped the pew in front of him, knuckles white. I've waited too long already. Made her wait too long. Made her prove herself over and over when I should have just believed. Chaplain Thomas looked to me for guidance. I nodded slowly, heart racing. Dad turned to face the congregation, this man who'd never shown vulnerability, now stripped bare before 300 witnesses. He reached into his jacket, pulling out something small and metallic. "This is my service pin," he said, voice gaining strength. 3 months. That's all I managed before a training accident sent me home. Broken back, broken dreams, broken man. He laughed bitterly. Came back to Iowa feeling like a failure. Married Susan, had 3 girls when I wanted sons. Spent 20 years angry at God for giving me daughters instead of boys to carry on what I couldn't finish. He turned to look at me directly. Then my youngest joins up. The one who tried hardest to please me. The one I pushed away furthest. And what does she do? She becomes everything I couldn't. Not just a sailor, a SEAL, not just serving, leading, not just surviving, thriving. His voice broke completely, and I hated her for it. Gasps from the civilian section. The military members remained still, recognizing confession as its own form of courage. Every medal she earned felt like judgment on my failure. Every rank she gained reminded me of what I'd lost. So I diminished it, dismissed it, told myself she was playing soldier, pretending to be something she wasn't. Tears flowed freely down his face. Because if I admitted she was real, I'd have to admit I was the pretender, the failure, the coward. "Dad, you're not," I began. "Yes, I am." He cut me off. A coward. Too scared to face my own daughter's success. Too proud to celebrate her victories. Too stubborn to see the warrior she'd become. He held up the service pin, this small piece of metal that represented everything lost and found. I saved every article about her, every mention in Navy Times, every blog post from military families, hidden in a box in my garage like contraband, reading about my daughter's heroism in secret while telling her to her face she was wasting her life. Mom stood beside him now, tears matching his. Amy and Jessica clung to each other, mascara ruined beyond repair. But today, Dad continued, voice growing stronger. I watched 150 warriors salute my baby girl, heard admirals and senators describe acts of courage I can't even comprehend, learned she saved hundreds of lives, prevented disasters, bled for strangers in countries I can't pronounce. He walked out of the pew, approaching the altar on unsteady legs. The honor guard didn't stop him. Something in his broken dignity commanded respect. Captain, Admiral, Chastity. He stood before me, this man who'd towered over my childhood, now seeming small and fragile. I failed you. As a father, as a man, as an American who should have honored your service from day one. I let pride and jealousy and fear rob us of 20 years. He held out the service pin. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. No, I can't make up for missed promotions, missed celebrations, missed everything. But I want you to have this, the only military honor I earned. Want you to know that if I could go back, I'd be the first one cheering when you signed up. First one at your graduation. First one saluting when you proved everyone wrong. His hand shook as he extended the pin. You're not Frank Miller's disappointing daughter. You're Admiral Chastity Miller, hero and warrior. And I'm just the fool who took 20 years to see it. The chapel held its breath. I looked at the pin, this small symbol of dreams deferred and identity fractured. Then at the man offering it, finally broken open enough to let truth in. I don't need your pin, Dad, I said softly. His face crumpled further, hands starting to drop. But I'll take my father back, if he's finally ready to see me. The sob that escaped him echoed off the chapel walls. He swayed forward, and I caught him letting him collapse against the daughter he'd pushed away for 2 decades. His tears soaked into my dress whites, and I held him while he shook apart. I'm sorry," he whispered over and over. "So sorry, my warrior girl, my hero, I'm so sorry." Behind him, the congregation blurred through my own tears. Ryan stood patient and understanding, knowing this reconciliation was as important as any vow we'd exchange. The military members watched with approval, recognizing redemption when they saw it. Finally, Dad pulled back, trying to compose himself. He looked around the chapel, taking in the faces of those who'd stood where he'd failed. "You protected her," he addressed the military members. "We're her family when I wouldn't be. Thank you. Thank all of you." He turned to Walsh and my SEAL team. "You believed in her when her own father didn't. I owe you everything." Walsh stepped forward from his position. "With respect, sir, we didn't do her any favors. Your daughter earned every bit of respect she's given. We just had the privilege of witnessing it." Dad nodded, then surprised everyone by his next move. He walked to Admiral Morrison and extended his hand. "Admiral, I understand your son serves because of my daughter's actions. I'd like to learn more about all of it. The missions you can talk about, the ones you can't. The daughter I never knew." His voice steadied with new purpose. "I've got years of ignorance to overcome. Could you help me understand?" Morrison shook his hand firmly. "Mr. Miller, educating families about their heroes' service is part of our mission. I'll personally ensure you learn everything classification allows." Dad returned to me, standing straighter despite tear-stained cheeks. He unpinned the Vietnam service pin from his jacket. "I know you're wearing it on your bouquet," he said, "but could you wear it on your uniform? Just for today, let an old fool pretend he contributed something to the warrior you became." I took the pin, attaching it beneath my ribbons where regulations allowed personal items. "You contributed more than you know, Dad. The determination you showed despite injury, the way you built a business from nothing, the stubbornness that drove me crazy, I inherited all of that. Used it to survive Hell Week, complete missions, keep pushing when everything said quit." "You got the best parts," he said roughly, "left the worst behind." "I got all of it, just learned to aim it better." He laughed through tears, the sound rusty but real. Then with dignity that transcended his breaking, he returned to his pew, but not before stopping to salute me properly, holding it until I returned the gesture. "Now then," Chaplain Thomas said gently, "shall we continue with the rings?" The rest of the ceremony flowed like water, returning to its course. Rings exchanged vows, completed pronouncements made. But when Chaplain Thomas announced, "You may kiss your bride," the chapel erupted in celebration that went beyond normal wedding joy. This was recognition of something greater. Love found despite odds, family redeemed through truth, a warrior finally fully seen by all who mattered. As Ryan and I turned to face the congregation as husband and wife, the military members snapped to attention. One voice rang out. "Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. and Mrs. Ryan Hayes and Admiral-Select Chastity Miller. Lenses." The roar that followed could have been heard at Quantico. Warriors who'd faced death without flinching cheered themselves hoarse. Dad stood in the front row applauding until his hands had to hurt, tears still flowing, but mixed now with a pride 20 years overdue. We processed down the aisle through an arch of raised swords tradition, and transformation merged into one perfect moment. At the chapel door, I paused, looking back at the sacred space where so much had shifted. Dad caught my eye across the distance, raised his hand to his heart, mouthed, "My hero." 20 years late, but finally home. The reception hall at the Naval Academy gleamed with military precision and wedding elegance combined. Round tables draped in navy and gold hosted groups that would never naturally mix Navy SEALs, sharing stories with Ryan's surgical colleagues, Marine raiders comparing notes with Senator Hayes's political associates, my Iowa relatives surrounded by more brass than they'd seen in their entire lives. At the head table, I finally had a moment to breathe. Ryan's hand found mine under the tablecloth thumb, tracing gentle circles on my palm. "How are you holding up, Admiral?" he murmured. "Still processing," I admitted. 20 years of fighting for recognition I told myself I didn't need. And then everyone saw you at once. The reception flowed with surprising ease. Admiral Morrison had arranged for a military coordinator who seamlessly blended traditions. The cake cutting with Ryan's grandfather's Marine Corps sword. Toasts that ranged from Walsh's hilarious and heavily edited training stories to Helen Morrison's elegant welcome to the military spouse community. But I kept watching Dad. He sat at the family table like a man reborn, leaning forward to catch every word as various operators stopped by to share sanitized stories about my service. Each tale seemed to rebuild him, replacing 20 years of willful ignorance with pride that threatened to burst from his chest. The traditional father-daughter dance approached with all the subtlety of an incoming missile. The band leader, a Navy musician, announced it with careful diplomacy. "Ladies and gentlemen, we invite the father of the bride and Admiral-select Miller to share their dance." Dad rose immediately, crossing to me with purpose that reminded me he'd once been military himself, however briefly. He extended his hand formally. "May I have this dance, Admiral?" "Just chastity, Dad. I'm just chastity." "No," he said firmly. "You're never just anything again, not to me." We moved on to the dance floor as the opening notes of My Girl began his choice communicated to the band without my knowledge. His hand on my waist trembled slightly, whether from emotion or age I couldn't tell. "I used to dance with you standing on my feet," he said quietly. "Remember you were maybe 4, demanded to dance at Amy's birthday party." "I remember." "Even then you were determined, wouldn't let me stop until you'd learned the basic steps." His voice roughened. "Should have seen it then. The warrior you'd become. Instead, I spent 20 years trying to make you small enough to fit my vision." "Dad." "No, let me finish. I've got 20 years of apologies to make, and one dance isn't enough time." He guided us through a simple box step muscle memory from decades past. "You asked why I saved those articles if I was so disappointed. Truth is, I was never disappointed in you. I was disappointed in myself. Every achievement of yours highlighted my failure. Not my injury, but what I did with it. I let 3 months of service define my entire life. You took 20 years and made them legendary." Around us, other couples had joined the floor. Ryan danced with his mother while Mom partnered with Admiral Morrison. But I barely noticed focused on this man I'd thought I knew completely. "The worst part," Dad continued, "is what I stole from you. Not just support or recognition, but safety. You had a home where you should have felt celebrated, and I made it a battlefield. You conquered real enemies overseas while fighting a war in your own family." "I learned to fight from watching you," I said. "The way you built your business after the injury, never accepting limitations, always pushing forward. You taught me that even if you didn't mean to." He pulled back enough to meet my eyes. "Don't give me credit I don't deserve. You succeeded despite me, not because of me." A sad smile crossed his face. "Though, if we're being honest, maybe that stubbornness to prove me wrong drove you further than support would have. We'll never know." "No, we won't." He spun me gently, surprisingly graceful. "But we've got future to work with. Your mother tells me you and Ryan are thinking about children eventually. Someday, when deployments slow down. I'd like to be a better grandfather than I was a father, if you'll let me." The music began to fade, but Dad held on for an extra moment. "Chastity, can I ask you something? Of all the things you've done, all the missions and medals and ranks, what are you most proud of?" I thought carefully. "Honestly, today, standing up there in full uniform with everyone watching, being exactly who I am without apology or compromise. The scared 18-year-old who ran away to the Navy dreamed of belonging somewhere. Today I belonged everywhere, in the military and love, even in my own family. That's the real victory. His eyes filled again. Then I'm proud of today, too. Proud I finally got to see it. The music changed to something upbeat, and the dance floor filled with celebrating guests. Dad led me back toward the head table, but stopped suddenly, spotting someone in the crowd. Is that Tom Garrison?" I followed his gaze to a table near the back, where indeed Tom sat, looking deeply uncomfortable, apparently someone's plus one. "Small world," I murmured. Dad's expression hardened with purpose. "Excuse me for one moment." Before I could stop him, he strode across the reception hall. The crowd seemed to part, sensing drama. I hurried after him, Ryan appearing at my side. "Tom." Dad's voice carried clearly. "Fancy seeing you here?" Tom half rose from his seat, face flushing. "Frank, I didn't know you'd be... I came with a colleague who knows the groom's family." "Sit," Dad commanded. "I've got something to say, and you're going to hear it." The surrounding tables fell quiet, sensing confrontation. Several SEALs shifted position, ready to intervene if needed. 20 years ago, Dad announced loud enough for half the room to hear, "I tried to set this man up with my daughter. Told him she'd thrown her life away joining the Navy. Promised him I'd convince her to quit and marry him." He looked around the watching crowd. "Any of you fine military folks want to know what he said?" "Frank, please," Tom squirmed. "He said the military was no place for women, said he'd help her see sense once they were married, even offered to arrange a hardship discharge so she could raise his son from his failed first marriage." Dad's voice dripped contempt. I thought I was doing right by her, thought I was saving her from a hard life. He turned back to Tom. "Take a good look around this room, Tom. See these warriors. They trust my daughter with their lives. See those medals on her uniform, each one earned in blood and sacrifice. See that man beside her, a surgeon who saves children in war zones and considers himself lucky to stand in her shadow." Tom seemed to shrink with each word. "You thought you'd be doing her a favor by marrying her, taking on damaged goods, as I so shamefully put it then." Dad's voice rose. "The only damaged goods in that restaurant 20 years ago were the two of us, small men trying to make her smaller. Thank God she was too strong for our poison." "Dad," I touched his arm, "he's not worth this energy." "You're right," Dad agreed. "But I need to say it. Need everyone to know how wrong I was, how magnificent you were for refusing our pathetic offer." He looked at Tom one last time. "Get out. This is a celebration for heroes and you don't qualify." Tom fled, literally abandoning his table mates and heading for the exit. The room erupted in applause and laughter. Dad stood there chest heaving like he'd run a marathon. "Feel better?" I asked. 20 years better," he admitted. Then louder, "I need all of Chastity's military friends to know something. I was worse than that man. He was a stranger trying to diminish her. I was her father. Every one of you who supported her, who saw her worth. When I wouldn't, you're better men than I'll ever be. But I'm going to spend whatever time I have left trying to earn a fraction of your honor." Walsh stood up at his table. "Mr. Miller, with respect, you just showed more courage than half the men I serve with. Admitting you're wrong takes guts. Doing it publicly takes integrity. Doing it at your daughter's wedding in front of 300 witnesses. That's warrior spirit." Other voices joined in, offering absolution. I wasn't sure Dad deserved, but desperately needed. He stood there absorbing it, this man who'd hidden behind pride for 2 decades, finally exposed and somehow stronger for it. The rest of the reception became a celebration not just of marriage, but of transformation. Dad threw himself into conversation with every operator who'd share stories. He danced with Mom to amazed whispers from Amy and Jessica. He toasted Ryan's family with eloquence that surprised everyone. During the cake cutting, he approached with Mom and my sisters in tow. "We have something for you," Amy said, producing an envelope. Dad's idea, but we all contributed. Inside was a check that made me blink. Dad, this is every penny I saved for a proper wedding, he said. Since you gave us something infinitely better than proper. Consider it a down payment on the house I know you and Ryan will need. One with room for grandchildren and visiting parents who promise to actually be supportive. We can't accept this. You will, Mom said firmly. 20 years of Christmas and birthday gifts we should have given with pride instead of judgment. It doesn't make up for anything, but it's a start. Jessica, quiet until now, stepped forward. Chastity, I need to say something. Growing up, I parroted Dad because I wanted his approval, repeated his words about knowing your place, about proper roles for women. Then today, watching you stand up there with all those warriors saluting you. She swallowed hard. My daughter's 8. She's been saying she wants to be a soldier. I've been discouraging her, steering her toward appropriate interests. That stops today. If she wants to be a warrior like her aunt, I'll support her every step. Oh, Jessie, I pulled her into a hug. I mean it, she whispered fiercely. I'll even bring her to visit you on base. Let her see what's possible, what you made possible. As the evening wound toward its close, I found myself on the terrace overlooking the Severn River. The September air carried hints of autumn, and lights from the Naval Academy bridges created paths across dark water. Ryan found me there, slipping his arms around me from behind. Hiding from your own party. Just processing. Today has been everything, he finished. I know. Your dad asked me if he could visit us in San Diego, wants to understand your world better. What did you tell him? That he'd be welcome, that healing takes time but starts with showing up. He paused. Was that okay? I turned in his arms, looking up at this man who'd stood patiently while my family drama played out on what should have been our day. Perfect, you're perfect. Hardly, but I'm yours, Admiral and all. We kissed as boat horns sounded on the River Naval Academy tradition, blessing our union. Inside the reception, continued laughter and war stories, mixing with wedding joy. My two families, blood and chosen, finally occupying the same space. No regrets, Ryan asked against my lips. I thought about it. 20 years of pain transmuted into purpose. A father's rejection transformed into recognition. A wedding that became a reconciliation. None, I said truthfully. Every battle led to this moment. Then let's go celebrate it. We walked back inside, hand in hand, into light and laughter, and a future where I could finally be all of myself with everyone who mattered bearing witness. The complete victory wasn't just Dad seeing me, or the Navy promoting me, or Ryan loving me. It was all of it together. Wounds healed, truth, acknowledged warrior and woman, finally fully whole. The Sterling Ballroom's crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows as the evening reached its golden hour. The formal toasts were complete, the cake demolished by hungry operators, and now the reception had settled into that perfect wedding rhythm of laughter, stories, and celebration. Ladies and gentlemen, the band leader announced, please join the bride and groom on the dance floor. Ryan led me out as the opening notes of At Last by Etta James filled the space. We'd chosen it together, the lyrics speaking to our journey of finding each other after our separate battles. You know, Ryan murmured as we swayed, when I met you in that hospital, I never imagined this. A room full of SEAL senators and family drama. A woman who could unite them all, who could take 20 years of pain and transform it into... He gestured at the scene around us. This. Other couples joined us gradually. Admiral Morrison with Helen, their movement still perfectly synchronized after 40 years. Walsh awkwardly leading a nurse from Ryan's hospital, his combat grace not quite translating to the dance floor. Mom and Dad holding each other like teenagers rediscovering love. The music shifted to something more upbeat, and the floor filled with a mix of military precision and civilian enthusiasm. I was laughing at Rodriguez attempting to teach Senator Hayes' wife to two-step when the band leader tapped the microphone. Folks, we have a special request. Would the bride please remain on the floor? We have a surprise." Ryan kissed my cheek and stepped back, leaving me alone in a suddenly empty circle. Confusion must have shown on my face because Walsh grinned from the sideline. "Trust us, Miller." The lights dimmed except for a single spotlight on me, then drums. Deep, rhythmic, primal drums that seemed to echo from somewhere ancient. From the shadows they emerged. My SEAL brothers moving in perfect synchronization. But this wasn't military drill. This was something else entirely. The haka, the Maori warrior dance. "Hi aha te mea nui," Thompson's voice rang out, starting the chant. "What is the most important thing?" "Hi tangata, hi tangata, hi tangata." The group responded, "It is people, it is people, it is people." They moved as one organism, feet stomping hands, slapping thighs and chests, faces fierce with warrior pride. The traditional Maori war dance learned from New Zealand, special forces during joint operations perform now for one of their own. Ka mate ka ora. We die, we live, we live. The power of it vibrated through the floor, through my bones. These men who'd faced death beside me, now honoring me with a dance reserved for the greatest warriors. Tears streamed down my face as I understood the significance. The movements grew more intense, more synchronized. Civilians pressed against the walls, awed and slightly intimidated by the raw display of brotherhood. The drums reached crescendo as the warriors dropped to one knee in perfect unison fists, striking the floor with a boom that rattled champagne glasses. "Awe hai," they shouted as one then silence. In that silence, Walsh stepped forward. "Miller, our sister, our warrior, you taught us strength has no gender. Courage has no limits. Family isn't just blood." He gestured to the kneeling SEALs. "We are your brothers, forever. Hoo-yah." The response thundered from every military throat in the room. I stood there, makeup destroyed, unable to speak. These men had given me what 20 years of fighting for my father's approval couldn't: unconditional acceptance, respect, and love. But they weren't done. Music began again, different this time. Middle Eastern drums and strings. The SEALs rose and moved aside as another group took the floor. Female service members, some I knew, others I'd never met. Navy, Army, Marines, Air Force, even Coast Guard. They began to move in a dance I recognized from deployments learned from Afghan women who'd shared their culture during joint operations. A dance of resilience, of feminine strength, surviving in hostile environments. Lieutenant Sarah Blackwood, the young woman who'd visited my quarters that morning, led them. Her movements were uncertain but determined, following the lead of more experienced servicewomen. They circled me, hands linked, creating a protective barrier of sisters in arms. For every woman who was told she couldn't, one called out. For every girl who dreams of serving, another added. For proving the impossible possible, Sarah said, meeting my eyes, we dance. They spun faster uniform skirts, flaring regulation shoes, beating ancient rhythms. The dance spoke of generations of women warriors from ancient Amazons to modern operators, all connected by the refusal to accept limitations. As their dance concluded, the two groups merged, male and female warriors creating one circle with me at the center. The music shifted again, and I recognized the opening notes of the Navy hymn. Eternal Father, strong to save, 300 voices sang together, whose arm hath bound the restless wave. Through the singing warriors, I saw my family. Dad stood ramrod straight, attempting to sing along, though he didn't know the words. Mom held his arm, tears flowing freely. Amy and Jessica clutched each other, finally, understanding that this was my true family, extended, not replaced. The hymn ended, but nobody moved. The moment held us all in its grip, too profound to break. Then Dad stepped forward. He walked through the circle of warriors who parted respectfully. In his hands was the shadow box he'd brought containing his meager military memories. He stopped before me, this man who'd spent 2 decades denying my service. I have something to say. His voice carried clearly. To all of you who've been her family when I failed to be. He turned in a slow circle, addressing the room. You showed her respect I withheld, gave her belonging I denied, celebrated victories I diminished. He opened the shadow box, revealing not just his service pins, but something new, a folded flag triangular in its case. This flag flew over Fob Chapman in Afghanistan, he said, voice breaking. Admiral Morrison helped me acquire it. The base where Chastity saved lives, where she became the ghost of Kandahar, where she proved everything I said was impossible. He held it out to me with shaking hands. I want you to have this. Display it in your home. Remember that even when your father was too blind to see you were serving under these colors, making them proud, making me proud even when I was too stupid to admit it. I accepted the flag its weight, both physical and symbolic. There's more, Dad continued. He pulled out a small leather journal. 20 years of letters I wrote but never sent. Apologies. Congratulations. Pride I couldn't voice. He placed it in my hands. Read them when you're ready, or burn them. But know that even in my worst moments, part of me always saw the hero you were becoming. The music started again, softer now. Dad extended his hand. One more dance, I promise not to ruin it with more speeches. We moved together as the crowd gave us space. This time, his steps were sure, leading me through movements that felt both foreign and familiar. You know, he said quietly, your mother and I used to dance every Friday night when we were young. Before kids, before injuries, before I let bitterness take over. She was so graceful like you are now. Why did you stop? Because I stopped doing all the things that made me happy, punishing myself for failing to be the warrior I dreamed of being. He spun me gently. Don't make my mistakes Chastity. Don't let service define you so completely that you forget to live. You've proven everything that needs proving. Now prove you can be happy. I am happy, Dad. I know. I can see it now. That Ryan, he's good for you. Grounds you without trying to tame you, like your mother did for me before I pushed her away. His voice grew thoughtful. I've been thinking about retirement. Selling the business, maybe traveling with your mom, visiting you in San Diego, being present for the life I missed. I'd like that. Would you, even after everything? I looked at this man who'd caused so much pain now, trying so desperately to heal what he'd broken. Family is complicated, Dad, but it's still family. The music was ending, but Dad held on for one more moment. I love you, Admiral Miller, my warrior daughter, my hero. I love you too, Dad. As we separated, the entire room erupted in applause. Not the polite golf claps of weddings, but the thunderous approval of warriors witnessing redemption. Ryan appeared at my side, slipping his arm around my waist. How are you holding up? Like I've been through Hell Week again, but emotional version. He laughed. Well, the night's almost over, just the send-off left. But first, one more surprise. Admiral Morrison took the microphone, calling for attention. Before our couple departs for their honeymoon, the Special Operations community has one more gift. He gestured to someone at the back. A color guard entered bearing flags from each service branch. Behind them, representatives from every Special Operations unit formed up. They created an honor corridor leading to the ballroom exit. Tradition holds that warriors are sent to new missions with proper ceremony, Morrison announced. Marriage is the ultimate joint operation requiring all the skills you've learned, and some you'll have to develop. Captain Miller, Mr. Hayes, your mission awaits. Ryan and I linked hands, moving toward the corridor. As we passed each group, they called out, Navy SEALs, fair winds and following seas. Army Special Forces de Oppresso Liber. Marine Raiders Spiritus Invictus. Air Force Special Tactics first there. At the end of the corridor, my team waited. Walsh stepped forward with a final gift, a paddle traditional SEAL memorabilia with brass plaques from every operation we'd shared. So you never forget where you came from, he said gruffly, or who's got your six, no matter where life takes you. I hugged him fiercely, this brother in everything but blood. We passed through the honor guard into the September night. Behind us, 300 voices rose in the warrior cry that transcended service branches. Hoo-yah! But the most important voice was quieter. Dad stood at the doorway, Mom beside him, both waving like parents sending their child to first day of school. "Make us proud," he called out. I laughed through tears, waving back. "Already did, Dad. Already did." As our car pulled away from the Naval Academy, I looked back at the chapel illuminated against the darkness. Today had rewritten 20 years of pain into a story of triumph. The girl who'd run away to find belonging had discovered it everywhere in the teams, who bled beside her, in the man who loved her completely, and finally in the family who'd learned to see her truly. The dance was over. The real journey together had just begun. 3 months after the wedding, San Diego's December sunshine felt like a miracle compared to the Afghan winter I'd have been facing on deployment. Instead of planning operations, I stood in our new home's nursery painting walls, soft sea glass green, while Etta James played through the speakers. "I thought we agreed on yellow," Ryan said from the doorway, still in surgical scrubs from his marathon shift. "We did. Then I saw this color and thought about the ocean at dawn. Peaceful but strong." I touched the wall where paint met window frame. "Like what I hope our children will be." He crossed to wrap his arms around me from behind both of us, paint splattered and exhausted but content. The house in Coronado had been our combined wedding gift to ourselves, using Dad's contribution and our savings. Close enough to base for my duties, near enough to the hospital for Ryan's work with room to grow. "Speaking of children," Ryan murmured against my neck, "when do you want to tell them?" "Tell who what?" "Your family, about..." His hand settled gently on my still flat stomach. "After the ceremony tomorrow, one massive announcement at a time." Tomorrow, my official promotion ceremony to Rear Admiral lower half, the youngest woman ever to achieve flag rank in the U.S. Navy. The weight of that still hadn't fully settled. A knock interrupted my thoughts. Through the window, I saw Dad's truck in the driveway. He and Mom had driven out from Iowa for the ceremony, their third visit since the wedding. Each trip revealed more healing layers of hurt peeling away to show what might have always been there. "Come in," I called. Dad entered, carrying his toolbox, Mom behind him with a casserole dish. They'd developed this routine, him fixing things that didn't really need fixing, her cooking enough food for a battalion. "Thought I'd check those cabinet hinges." Dad announced, though we both knew Ryan had already adjusted them perfectly. "Big day tomorrow. Everything needs to be shipshape." I let him putter, understanding he needed to contribute somehow. Mom commandeered the kitchen, humming while she organized food she'd insisted on preparing for the post-ceremony reception. "Chastity," she called Jessica's flying in tonight with Lily. "She's so excited to see Aunt Admiral in action." My 8-year-old niece had become my shadow during family visits, pestering me with questions about the Navy, about training, about what it meant to be a warrior. Jessica, true to her word, had enrolled Lily in martial arts and young Marines, supporting dreams she'd once been taught to suppress. As evening settled, our home filled with chosen family. Walsh and the team arrived early, taking over security preparations with comic seriousness. Helen Morrison arranged flowers with military precision. Senator Hayes held court in the living room, regaling everyone with stories from his own naval service. But the moment that stopped, my heart came when a familiar figure appeared at the door in dress blues. Ensign Blackwood, reporting as ordered, Admiral, "Si, Dadsin, Sekonur Halmir." Sarah stood at attention, having graduated from BUD/S 2 weeks prior. The second woman to earn a trident, following the path I'd carved through blood and determination. "As you were ensign," I said through a tight throat, "how does it feel?" "Like I finally understand what you meant about belonging, ma'am. My boat crew." She grinned. "They're my brothers now. They carried me when I couldn't carry myself, just like yours did." We talked on the porch as the sun set over the Pacific, 2 women separated by a generation, but united by shared experience. She told me about Hell Week, about the moment she wanted to quit, about touching her trident for the first time. "There's something else, ma'am," she said eventually. My class dedicated our graduation to you, officially. It's in the records. Class 298 dedicates this achievement to Captain Chastity Miller, who proved the impossible possible. I had to turn away ostensibly to watch the sunset, but really to compose myself. Chastity. Dad's voice came from behind us. Sorry to interrupt. Could I borrow you for a moment? I followed him to the garage where he'd been working on something mysterious all week. Under a tarp sat a handcrafted shadow box, larger and more elaborate than anything commercially available. Made this myself, he said quietly, pulling off the cover. Thought you should have something fitting for your new rank. The craftsmanship was exquisite. Compartments for medals, spaces for unit patches, a central display for my trident. But what caught my eye was the engraving on the brass plate. Rear Admiral Chastity Miller, daughter. Warrior, hero. You proved them all wrong by proving yourself right. Below that, in smaller text, with love, pride, and 20 years of apologies, Dad. It's perfect, I whispered. There's one more thing. He pulled out a small box. Inside lay his own service pins, polished to mirror brightness. Want you to carry these tomorrow, full circle. What I couldn't finish, you completed 1,000-fold. The garage felt too small for the moment. This man who'd built his life with his hands had crafted something that held all the words he'd never been able to say. I'll be proud to carry them, Dad. The next morning dawned crystal clear, one of those perfect San Diego days that made the rest of the country jealous. Naval Base Coronado buzzed with activity as we arrived for the ceremony. The venue was larger than typical promotions required, but apparently when the first female SEAL makes Admiral people pay attention. In the ready room, I donned my dress whites for what felt like the 1,000th time, but everything was different now. The shoulder boards bore a single star. The combination cover carried Admiralty insignia. I was crossing from officer to flag officer, joining ranks that had seemed impossible when I'd walked into that recruiting office at 18. Ready? Ryan asked, resplendent in his formal suit. Never been more ready. The ceremony venue was packed beyond capacity. Every SEAL team on the West Coast had sent representatives. Female service members from across branches filled entire sections. Media lurked at the edges, held back by public affairs officers. In the front row, my family sat together. Dad in his best suit with Mom beside him. Amy and Jessica with their families, including Lily in a miniature Navy dress uniform Jessica had found somewhere. My mother-in-law with Senator Hayes. Blood and chosen family merged. Admiral Morrison presided his presence, lending weight to an already momentous occasion. As I stood at attention, he read from the official orders. The President of the United States, acting upon the recommendation of the Secretary of the Navy, has placed special trust and confidence in the patriotism, integrity, and abilities of Captain Chastity Miller. The words washed over me, carrying the weight of history. First woman through Bud S., first female SEAL in combat, first to wear these stars earned in the crucible of special operations. When the moment came to exchange shoulder boards, I'd chosen carefully. Ryan would remove the captain's eagles representing the partner who'd supported me. Dad would attach the Admiral's star symbolizing family reconciled. Dad's hands shook slightly as he pinned on the star. He whispered, "Should have been doing this all along, celebrating every promotion. I'm sorry." "You're here now," I whispered back. "That's what matters." Admiral Morrison raised his voice for the oath. I repeated the words I'd said at every advancement, but they carried new weight now. Flag officers led differently. Influence policy shaped the future of naval service. I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. As the final words echoed, the crowd erupted. 300 people on their feet applauding not just my achievement, but what it represented. The barrier broken, the path carved, the future opened. Then cutting through the noise, Lily's voice, "That's my Aunt Chastity. She's an admiral. I'm going to be just like her." Even Admiral Morrison cracked a smile at that. The reception flowed with military efficiency and family warmth. I stood in receiving lines, shook hundreds of hands, accepted congratulations that ranged from formal to tearfully emotional. Female service members approached with their daughters asking for photos, sharing stories of how my journey had influenced theirs. During a quiet moment, I found myself outside looking across the base where I'd spent so many years, from trainee to operator to leader to flag officer. The journey seemed impossible in retrospect, yet here I stood. Penny for your thoughts, Admiral Ryan appeared with 2 glasses of sparkling cider mine, pointedly non-alcoholic. Thinking about a scared 18-year-old who ran away to the Navy, wondering what she'd think of all this. I think she'd be proud, amazed, maybe a little terrified of the responsibility. Definitely terrified. I touched the star on my shoulder. This isn't just about me anymore. Every decision I make affects the future of women in special operations, the policies I influence, the doors I open or fail to open. Hey, he turned me to face him. You've been carrying that weight since day one. The only difference now is that the Navy finally recognizes it officially. He was right, of course. Every day, as the only woman in my training class on my teams and operations, I'd carried the burden of representation. Now I had the rank to make real changes. Besides, he added with a grin, you're about to carry something else, ready to tell them all. Inside the reception had reached the toast portion. Walsh had just finished a hilarious and slightly inappropriate story about our first deployment when I took the microphone. Thank you all for being here, I began, for supporting not just me, but what this moment represents. When I joined the Navy, women weren't allowed in combat. When I arrived at Bud S, they said women couldn't be SEALs. When I deployed, they said women couldn't operate at the tip of the spear. I looked around the room. You proved them wrong. We proved them wrong. Together. Applause threatened to derail my speech, but I held up a hand. Today marks a new chapter. As an admiral, I'll have influence over policy, over training, over the future of special operations. I promise to use that influence to ensure no qualified warrior is turned away because of gender, race, or any other irrelevant factor. Excellence will be the only standard. More applause. I waited for quiet. But there's another chapter beginning. Ryan and I have an announcement. I found Dad's eyes in the crowd. You're going to be grandparents, all of you, because this child will be raised by an entire community of warriors. The room exploded. Mom rushed forward, tears streaming. Dad stood frozen until Mom dragged him into the embrace. My sisters squealed like teenagers. The SEALs started chanting, "Baby SEAL, baby SEAL," until Ryan laughingly called for order. Due in June, I added when the noise died down, which gives me 6 months to establish new policies before taking maternity leave. 6 months to prove that warriors can create life as readily as we're trained to take it. The rest of the reception blurred into joy and celebration. Plans were made, advice offered, promises of support that I knew would be kept. This community that had witnessed my transformation from scared recruit to admiral would now watch the next evolution warrior to mother. As the event wound down, I found Dad outside again, sitting on a bench overlooking the ocean. You okay? He patted the space beside him. Your mother told me you're planning to name the baby Francis if it's a boy, after me. Middle name, I confirmed. Ryan Francis Hayes, carrying forward the best parts while making something new. I don't deserve that honor. Dad. I took his weathered hand. We've all made mistakes, held on to hurt too long, let pride override love. But we're here now, together. That's what matters. He squeezed my hand, looking out at the Pacific. Think he'll want to be a SEAL like his mom. Or she. And they'll be whatever they choose. Doctor like Ryan, builder like you, teacher like Mom. Or yes, maybe a warrior. But they'll grow up knowing every path is open. No limitations except the ones they place on themselves. That's good. His voice broke. That's what I should have given you. You gave me stubbornness, determination, the refusal to accept no as final. I leaned against his shoulder. Those gifts served me pretty well. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. 20 years of pain had led to this moment of peace. The frightened girl who'd fled Iowa had become an admiral. The father who'd rejected her choices had become her strongest supporter. The family that had fractured had healed into something stronger. Admiral Miller. A young sailor appeared nervous but determined. "Sorry to interrupt, I'm Seaman Martinez. I wanted to thank you. My daughter's 12, wants to be a Marine. I've been telling her to consider other options, easier paths. But seeing you today," she straightened. "I'm going home to tell her she can be anything, even a Marine, even a SEAL if she wants." After she left, Dad chuckled. "Going to be a lot of that in your future. Young women seeing possibility. Parents learning to support dreams they don't understand." "I hope so." "No so. You changed the world, baby girl, one stubborn step at a time." As we headed back inside, I caught sight of my reflection in a window. Admiral's stars on my shoulders, wedding ring on my finger, new life growing within. The scared 18-year-old was gone, transformed into something she'd never dared imagine. Inside, Ryan was organizing the final details of our departure. Tomorrow, we'd fly to Australia for a delayed honeymoon. 2 weeks of being just Chastity and Ryan, not Admiral Miller and Dr. Hayes. 2 weeks to rest before the real work began. "Ready?" he asked, wrapping an arm around me. "For anything," I replied, meaning it. As we said our goodbyes, accepting final congratulations and promises to visit, I felt the weight of the future settling on my shoulders alongside the stars. There would be challenges ahead, policies to change, barriers to break, a child to raise in a world that was hopefully a little more open because of battles fought. But tonight, surrounded by family who'd learned to see me and warriors who'd always accepted me, I felt only gratitude. Every struggle had led here. Every rejection had forged strength. Every victory had opened doors for others. "Hey, Admiral," Walsh called out as we reached the door. "Remember rule number 1. I grinned, knowing what came next, the SEAL motto that had carried me through everything. "The only easy day was yesterday." I called back. "Hooyah, ma'am, hooyah." We left to a chorus of warrior cries and family tears, stepping into a future bright with possibility. Behind us, the Naval Base Coronado Chapel stood witness to all that had changed. Ahead, the Pacific stretched endless and blue, full of horizons yet to explore. I'd proven them wrong by proving myself right. Now came the harder task, proving that breaking barriers was just the beginning. The real work changing systems, opening doors, raising the next generation started now. But first 2 weeks of Australian sunshine, with the man who'd seen me clearly when I was still learning to see myself. 2 weeks of being simply Chastity wife and soon-to-be Mother Admiral stars left in the closet while I remembered how to be human. The scared girl from Iowa had become everything they said was impossible. Now it was time to make the impossible normal for everyone who followed. One stubborn, determined step at a time. What barriers have you broken in your own life? What did it take to prove doubters wrong and stay true to yourself? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear about your journey of transformation. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more narratives about triumph over adversity, family reconciliation, and the power of refusing to accept limitations. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that their dreams are valid no matter who doubts them. Thank you for joining me on Chastity's incredible journey. Remember, the only easy day was yesterday, but every difficult today builds a stronger tomorrow. Until next time, keep breaking barriers and proving them wrong by proving yourself right.